whatever you guys want to say. Welcome. It's the Matterall News Hour because we haven't actually figured out a name for this chill stream. But as you've seen, the Finnish live stream has just finished. And that was really bad. That was even worse than in my head. So we're going to talk about it because Hilmar talking for a long period of time is going to generate a conversation among the players. So here we are with a group of people. Let's see what their reactions are.
If they got rid of asset safety, I think I'll be very happy.
It's not an if. It sounded definitely like it's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to have the effect that they hope for, because I think this is going to mean that goons are going to rumble stomp the entire universe.
Yeah. It's just purge every structure, right?
Yeah, barrier of entry into null has just gone to like 100. If you are even thinking of putting up a structure in null now, it's just going to be rolled over. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Hello, you pinata.
Okay, well...
Yeah, I said earlier, including HiSec.
What?
The barrier to entry to the game.
All right. Hold on. The sky hasn't fallen yet. Let's first talk about what was said, and then you guys can discuss it. Not everything, but just what you guys are talking about. So this is a self-contained recording.
Well,
what are you reacting to, in other words, Caleb?
We were reacting to the fact that Hilmar almost confirmed that asset safety is going to change. So whether that means completely removing it or nerfing it a lot, but it definitely sounded like a confirmation that it's going to be changed.
And it sounded somewhat as though it's just going for certain stuff.
I think certain items is the key thing to remember here. It was definitely more of a focus on Titans and Supers and asset safety as opposed to other things.
I think the only counterplay to goons stomping areas is to make it about time, really. If they're going to spend like a month doing it.
Which it already is.
And it doesn't change, regardless of how much time.
It took us a month running 23/7 to stomp tribute.
That is good.
Yes, and they weren't even rewarded for that. Not
weren't
really.
getting loot.
Yeah, we weren't getting anything.
We were willing to run 23/7.
That's good, man, because that means that goons aren't prepared to go everywhere and do everything, because it's counter.
The problem is it's going to have the opposite effect of what they want, right? If you want to lower the entry, the barrier of entry to null, to get other people in there to actually contest the space, you don't do it by adding this feature, because it's going to have exactly the opposite effect. This is exactly as dumb as the tax change.
Out of
What
curiosity,
makes you think that they want it to be contested? Why aren't they just making it very, very difficult to be there? Which,
they
if you're saying
made
it's
the
very, very
comment
difficult to be there, that's exactly what they intend to do. So, working as intended.
And how is that going to nerf the big entities that are there now? Exactly.
All right, so I came in late
We don't know
because
whether that's their goal.
I came in late because I'm Pacific time.
I mean, that was stated explicit by them. They want the veterans and older groups to have to actually work, and they want it to be somewhat easier for the newer players and newer groups to get a foothold.
I really, really want that level of excitement from 2007, 2009 to come back again. I want to play under that. So
that requires vision like walking in station and brand unification and all those huge ideas. And that doesn't seem to be on the table anymore. At least they're not talking about it, even though it looks like they're developing for something like that.
I'd love to be 23 again, too.
I mean, if they're talking about things like Titan fuel, that could be something that you have conflict around. And so it's not just taking a nerf back to things, it's creating things that can generate conflict again, instead of the situation we have now.
Okay, but Titan fuel to do what?
Well, there's nothing worth fighting over at the moment, is there?
Right, but Titan fuel to do what?
Well, it would be a limited resource that would be fought over in the same way.
What would you use it for?
You could use it even for the stations if you wanted, because they don't require much in terms of maintenance either.
Right. But when you say Titan fuel, what does the Titan use it for? Bridging
Why are you
already
asking
uses
him?
fuel.
He's not CCP.
Because he's the one saying this is a great idea. Well, it sounds like a great idea, but what's it actually going to be used for? Is it going to be
The
fuel the
minute
Titan needs just to exist?
If you
Why
need
not?
fuel to jump, if you needed fuel
You
to
already need
run your
fuel to jump.
stations and stop them from being vulnerable, and that fuel was limited and it was important, that would be a conflict driver.
You already need fuel to keep your stations on high power. You already need fuel to jump. You need fuel to bridge. You need fuel to fire.
It's
Yeah,
not
but
fuel
it's not
that we go
balanced,
to
right?
war over, though, is it?
It's not what?
It's not the sort of fuel that you go to war over, though. It's not like the old POS and moon mining that were really, really good conflict drivers. People fought for them. They fought
It's
to keep
exactly
them.
the same stuff. I mean, it's stront and it's isotopes.
Yeah, but there's no real bottleneck, right? The bottleneck is
There
minor.
won't be a bottleneck on this either. Anything you introduce, people will harvest. If they can harvest it, you'll scale up that harvesting. There won't be a bottleneck.
Unless there's a limited amount by design.
Okay, then cool. The Imperium sits all its assets on it and solo strip mines it, and no one else can ever get any, right?
Well,
there we go.
We'll share
it
with
won't
Test.
just all be in Delve.
Hey, so that
assuming
people
it's not moving
can
around.
just 1 second, so that people can see who's talking. Can you guys jump with me into public 2, please?
This is good.
That works better. Okay. Let's can somebody just tell me some of the stuff that was said? It's just so we have some context. Otherwise, we're just kind of adrift.
Hilmar wants cat ears in the game.
He wants cat ears in the game.
He did say it's about time we started accepting stuff like that and not shy away from it.
He makes a decent point. The Galente are more than just Caldari without corners.
Yes, there should be a Galentian Pride Week every fucking year with stuff like this hitting the server.
I mean, the main thing I heard was that the game, and I really appreciated this. The game, when we talk about it in terms of new toys, is diminished, and he's saying we need to completely alter that aspect. It's a little bit convenient, but not to think of it in terms of shaping it as much, but almost creating the engines to let it shape itself, and for they themselves, CCP, to be surprised every once in a while.
It's just completely dumb to remove roadmap ideas completely. You want something to look forward to when you have a game that is already running. That is required to have things like that. Every other MMO does this and teases with upcoming patches. The fact that there's nothing to look forward to, only chaos, is just dumb.
And you need an idea of where you're going, because if you don't have an idea of where you're going, then every little fix that you throw in is scattered, aimless, and doesn't pull together into cohesive.
Well, because they don't announce a plan doesn't mean that they don't have one, but you're saying they don't have one.
The comment was that they have no internal roadmap.
Their plan is to build EVE into an ecosystem, to build it into something living beyond just what the players create on top. And
sure,
if they
you don't do that without a roadmap, though.
Yes, they could still have a development roadmap, but if you do that, in a sense, you're not just a developer, you're also a custodian of that environment, right? And so you have to shift your perspective on the role of CCP if they achieve what they want to achieve.
Well, I think they have in the past said what their roadmap is, at least for the next year. One is they're upgrading the technology. That's not just this year, but that's probably going into next year. The other thing for this year specifically was a huge effort for new players to diminish the complication and make it easier for new players, basically. And then also to conduct experiments and making the game a lot harder for the veteran players so that they could have more of a challenge, and they could pick where they wanted to be on that challenge scale. They could, again, climb Mount Olympus on Mars and work really hard to succeed at a very high level, Or if they wanted to graze, they could graze at a lower level of difficulty.
But they don't listen to the veterans that are telling them flat out and honestly, this is how you kind of strain and nerf the veteran players and the big orcs. And every time they're told this, they do the opposite, which means that they're actually strengthening them. It's as if they don't actually believe us or they don't understand their own game.
So you're saying we, the ones that are winning this game, I put that in quotations, are going to benefit from the changes you're making. Stop making us win.
Yes, that's been said.
Jesus Christ, yes.
Again and again.
Again and again.
I think the current players are too attached to the status quo. It's why they're so toxic and vitriolic
That's
about
why
any
we've
change.
been saying get rid of supers and titans for 10 years because we're really so attached.
But your guys, and you're from Goonswarm or the Imperium, have many more players because your requirements are not as strict as
Horde?
Not Horde, but NCPL, Triumvirate, everybody else that plays the game differently.
But Horde runs your coalition.
Well, that may be true. It's not my coalition, but it may be true. But they're doing the same thing that you're doing and allowing, getting a lot of people into the game. So this tells me that eliminating the very powerful singular ships would make a group that has many more players just as powerful or more powerful, because now everybody has smaller ships.
But that is legitimately one of the problems that has come along over the years. Like back in the day when you did have kind of like, let's call it elite PvP groups out there, you had a quality versus quantity thing that went on. You had lesser groups that were flying lesser ships with lesser pilots, but more of them, right? That would go up against these big giant things. Now they have the same things.
Yeah,
but with super
the idea of yesteryear with you've got to allow these big ships. It ain't coming back like that.
Okay, get rid of capital ships. Why not get rid of battleships at that point? Like, why capital ships?
Because you can make, and I didn't say capitals, I said supers and titans.
Okay,
and the reason for that is you can make everything else in low sec. If your super capital fleet gets wiped out, you're going to lose all your space. How are you going to get more supers and titans? You're not in numbers. You could replace all of your capitals. You could replace all of your battleships. You're not going to replace 50, 100 titans in anything close to a reasonable amount of time.
So this is a question. Why wouldn't they? Hold on. Why wouldn't? Because you said it specifically. If you lose your super fleet, you will be kicked out of your space. You cannot rebuild your super fleet. So what if you allow supers to be built in low? Would that help?
It would help in terms of being able to recover, but it's not going to help in terms of super capital proliferation is a problem, and you can just drop supers on everything. That's also part of the.
Here's the thing, right? They need to pivot themselves. The entire design philosophy needs to pivot themselves around space interactivity. They need to not be docked. They need to have reasons to undock. Veterans don't have.
Yeah, and it's also tied into the fact that they keep. It feels as if they don't understand how things work, right? In the real world, the only way to nerf rich people is to have things like inflation and upkeep costs. And then, of course, decadence. But these are the only things that can push rich people out of extreme wealth. This is exactly how it works. So inflation is what we want. The point is that you can only have inflation if you balance around sinks as well, right? But the sinks needs to be pushed onto the veterans, not onto the fucking new players. And they've done exactly the opposite of that just now. And they keep talking about how inflation is bad. It's not. That's how you make rich people poorer.
Here's the thing, right? I think new players have a lot of reasons to undock, but veterans don't.
Well, there's not really a difference between veterans and new players. If something's easy for new players, veterans can do it way easier, right?
But the thing is, we don't have a reason to risk losing our expensive.
Okay, so we can continue on this road, or can someone tell me just the top 5 things that were said on the stream as a TLDR?
Rip rolling.
I don't know what that is.
Not just rolling. Rip wormholes.
Yeah, he said.
I don't know what you guys are saying. So can you?
Hilmar said he doesn't really love the idea of wormhole players being able to control access to their space by easily and controllably rolling,
Yeah, he said
collapsing them
wormholes
on
were
demand because
routine
they've figured
and
out the
solved.
math.
Interesting, because we have these new drifter wormholes that are not collapsible or don't collapse entirely. They collapse, but they spring right back up, which is interesting because it's created a big problem in wormholes. Not a problem, but a challenge in wormholes, because 40 new holes have opened to nullsec. So you have this incredible freeway that bombers are able to get through and wreak havoc all over the place. I think there's 60 of them per day, if I'm not mistaken. And once you map out the network, you have it for the entire day since they don't close.
No.
You don't have it for the entire day because they don't open all at the same time.
They're also not mass limited. They are mass limited. They will collapse. They are not the same exit all the time. They are just predictable places, and they're not just high sec or no sec. It is high, null, low, and now wormholes as well that they exit.
All right.
And it's also not 60. It's 5 systems with 60 each.
Then I kind of sense that they're going to bring out a new structure. It kind of makes sense to me to kind of mechanize it a little bit.
Well, the information I got was from an FC that's using these to great effect. So I'll go back and ask him like what the characteristics of these drifter wormholes are. But I relate that to Hilmar saying that he doesn't like wormholes collapsible.
It wasn't so much collapsible, it was predictable
And
so that you
controlled.
don't lose stuff when doing it. Right?
Okay.
Because right now it was the same as we had with the hick change, and then collateral damage kicked off because the ability to make a hick smaller than a frigate was gone.
Okay, so that's the wormhole thing that was mentioned today.
Well, sorry, I was going historically, right, with the collateral damage thing. Making the hick small enough that you never lost it when it went through, right? Hilmar doesn't like that.
Okay.
He doesn't like that there's no loss, there's nothing like that.
Let's try this.
He wants it to be if you're rolling a wormhole.
This is what he said today.
Oh, sorry. Yes, if you're rolling a wormhole, there has to be loss. There has to be unpredictability into it, and so on and so forth. You can't just know the numbers, know how many ships it takes, and do it perfectly.
All right, so we'll try it one more time. What are some of the things that were said on the stream that peeked out to you guys? One was that one you just mentioned, the wormholes should be less predictable and less controllable. And what else?
They talked about the new player experience at length.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big issue for them. And then what else? We'll just do the top 5.
Asset safety. It doesn't want to put Titans in asset and safety and serve as an unlimited storage. It doesn't like that.
Oh, interesting.
Because people send their Titans to asset and safety, and then it's basically unlimited storage until they pull them out. And he says that Titans are so big that it doesn't make sense to be like that.
Sure.
But they were the ones actually making them able to dock. That's
exactly.
Hold on. So that's like 4. What else did he say?
There was something about... there was that, yes. There was also something about them changing the world up in such a way that the game changes without them.
Yeah.
His procedural regeneration idea.
Yeah, procedural regeneration.
Could you start with making loot tables dynamic?
Okay, stop commenting, Caleb, for a second so we can get through just the stuff that... Because we're trying to catch people up who weren't awake when this was going on.
The point is that it's a pie in the sky dream, and it's not going to work.
Okay, that's an analysis. I want to know like what was actually said. Some of the key TLDRs of it. And one was, the last one that you said was, what I heard, because I woke up for this part, don't treat it like a toy. Don't treat EVE Online like a toy, saying, here's our roadmap, this is what we're going to do. Here are the new bits and pieces that you're going to get for your collection, basically. And think of EVE as you develop it and play it as more of a world that evolves on its own and surprises the makers of the toy kind of thing.
Yeah,
they're
it
ceding
was
control.
pretty much that.
Yeah, they're ceding control over the results. and they're just going to do the experiments and look at the data and see what that does.
I think honestly the most interesting thing that Hilmar said during the entire frickin' thing was probably one of the throwaway lines that got overlooked. Was he wanted players to be able to innovate. He wanted us to be able to find new things to do, to develop new stuff in the game, and that they need to find ways to code the game so that it can allow us to do that without them allowing us to do that.
And another thing was that they're definitely focusing on EVE Online now. They're not in a complete janitor mode. They are really going to actually do something. That's what I took away from it.
That come up under the topic of someone asked him about the film or TV show, and he said they've shifted away from that and they're focused on it. Well, the whole IP, that is.
Developing the IP. So I guess.
But they're outsourcing a lot of those other things, right? In-house now, they're very focused on EVE Online and fixing some of the things that are broken. At least that's the feeling I get from him when he's talking about these things.
Also, wouldn't the TV show or movie still be part of focusing on the IP?
Yes, I think he meant more as in the IP as in the game and peripheral games that are coming.
They talked about their mobile app that looked really good. They sort of demoed it, where you can change your skills and even buy skills inside of it.
Right, on your phone, yeah, away from the
gun. And they said that that's going to be linked to more things because they've built it to be linked to more things, including PI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he almost sounded like he promised that PI will eventually come to a mobile device, which I think is awesome.
Oh, the PI portion of it is a mini game inside of EVE, but isn't it true the more stuff you export to a mobile device, I think technically you would get your numbers up because people playing on their phone would be considered playing the client, so your numbers would go up. But it also, PI was always a thing that you logged in to actually do, and that's one less thing that people will log in to actually do.
Only in the same way that you log into Zombie Farm. It's not really an active type of gameplay.
Well, sure it is. You can get caught and killed while you do it.
Only when you're actually going there to pick stuff up. Yeah. I mean, if you want, once you fire off the command structures on each planet, you can go and tether up and set things up on the planet, no problem.
Yeah, right. You can do that in safety. That's true. But when you go to pick things up, you can't be cloaked, and you can be, have 3 stabs on your industrial, and it's, make it pretty easy to get away. But there's still.
I don't think there's any idea of we're gonna let you actually pick stuff up from the customs office and bring it back to station on your phone.
Oh, I see.
That wouldn't be the part you can manage from your phone. That wouldn't make sense.
So what you're saying is that you can just manage. You can't haul the goods in from the planets. You can just manage their configuration.
All the stuff that doesn't involve a spaceship.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's more the fact that if they reiterate on it and get it back to what was originally the vision, so a farm will like mini game in space, then it won't be as AFK anymore, and you actually have to sit and play it to get the result, right? That's good for the game and the economy in general.
Yeah, and I can see how they could count numbers of people on their phone as people who are logging in, and that would be good for the perception of playability of the game.
And they can put all those Skinnerbox designs in there, right? All the addiction things that is used in other mobile games. Yeah. Maybe not the pay-to-win aspect, but at least the playability, that it's fun.
Yeah. Some people, like Pando, doesn't like the idea that you can count. I'm thinking doesn't like the idea that you can count those people. But I think one of the interesting things about mobile gaming is that you can stand up while you do it. You don't have to be sitting at your desk, and that's becoming I think a bigger health crisis. People sitting at their desks for 12, 15 hours a day. As you get older, that's a more dangerous thing to do.
Go buy a new desk.
Well, yeah, you could buy a desk that goes up and down, like, or you can offshore some of this or put some of this gameplay outside of Eve, which is kind of what we do, right? Because we are on Discord a lot of the time, a lot of the day. Probably play Discord a lot more than Eve.
The chat client was pretty much the first thing to get ported outside, right?
Yeah. And it's a good thing they did, because Discord would have eaten their lunch anyway. I mean, Discord's not only well adopted by gamers, but it's actually being adopted by actual organizations now, because it's just so easy to use.
Well, it started way before Discord, right? It started with IRC and Slack and all that stuff. It was the first thing we wanted out of the client, so we would be able to actually communicate without being logged into all our clients. And then the second one was, of course, the market, when they started scraping that.
I think you put... Go ahead.
If third-party tools for organizing and all of the other stuff that lets people do all of these really big groups is bad, then doesn't that mean that CCP should be against what we're doing right now?
They should. All this should happen in the client, right? It shouldn't even happen in Corp Chat or Mumble or whatever it is. It should have happened inside the client. One of the advantages of having communications inside the client was you could meet new people and start talking to them right away. You didn't have to say, here's my Mumble stuff, let me check out your security status and all this other stuff. Discord brought a lot of that back. You can just get into Discord and it's not that big a deal. There's no setup, there's no security protocols. So it's a step closer to just saying, hey, I just met you in the game, let's talk on my Discord. But it used to be that when you did an incursion fleet, you would meet people you didn't know and you'd start talking to them. And that was mostly a good thing. Could have been a bad thing as well. But exporting...
But ideally you want the player base to have access to things that they can take out and do third-party stuff with, right? And use alternative tools. And then CCP, when they see a value in it, they can iterate on it and put it back in the client if they want. But actually, many of these things, it makes no sense to have them inside the client, because the service that you get from the client is so bad.
Well, the reason that, the client would crash and then you'd lose communications, you wouldn't be able to communicate a unified login again, like everybody log back in now. So a lot of groups exported their ability to talk to each other so that didn't happen. When the client went down, because it was less stable back then, didn't affect your communication with each other. So that was one of the victims. I don't think you can get around that unless Eve had some kind of secondary client that you were talking on, which at that point you could just use the better client. That's why people moved to TS and Mumble and all that kind of stuff. And Discord ate everybody's lunch because, of course, it's not as secure, so it's not used yet for alliance and corporate comms for the most part in really high security situations, but it is very easy to get on and talking like we do on Discord.
It's not controlled, but it's fairly secure as far as I'm aware.
The monthly economic report has been released, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that.
Is it the MER? I thought it was the monthly security.
It's both of them.
Both have been reported. Both have been released.
So that's what we'll be talking about Sunday. We'll invite Noisy Gamer and Carneros and others to talk about the economic reports that have come out.
Oh, wow.
Shots fired.
It's a thing of beauty.
I'm just looking at how much the destroyed has dropped.
We knew that, right?
Destroyed. ISK destroyed. Dropped.
Please explain, like, how much?
I mean, like, it looks like by about...
I don't see that. Not in the end of the... Do you mean the very top graph, production versus destruction?
Give me a link to that so I can put it on screen for viewers.
I mean about actually looking at data,
links, not
the graphs they've produced.
Okay, monthly economic report for July. July is when the blackout hit, about the middle of July.
The file you want to look at is produce destroyed mine.csv and look at the daily destruction.
So let's go over to that. Is there an online version, or do you have to? Okay,
There's
total destroyed by region or total destroyed by value here.
Don't look at bounty prices. Oh, shit.
All right, guys, help guide me through this so that I can show other people too.
That's a literal fucking cliff. That's like a flash crash.
Use destroyed mind.csv near the bottom. For some reason, I don't have Excel local shit.
So, to be clear, Delve has taken an even further lead in NPC bounties per region, but has still dropped off by 10 trillion a month. The rest of the game has utterly collapsed.
That's hardly surprising, though.
Oh no, I'm not saying I'm surprised.
While you guys are talking about this, I'd like to have a graphic up. So just guide me one more time to what you're looking at.
If you want a graphic, you want the very top one on the Mer, I guess, production versus destruction.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just raw data. I don't think there's a good graphic for that.
All right. So in what we're looking at, the red line there is. Can't see.
He's produced.
Producing.
Red is produced.
All right. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Production.
Blue at the bottom
is blue.
destroyed.
Well, it looks like the destruction has been stable for many, many months now. That's actually 3 years that you're looking at. 2 years or 3.
Yeah, and it's trending downward as we get through July. Like there's the initial jump up with the blackout that hits on the 12th, and then it's trending down.
Yeah, but slightly, not much compared to the overall scale of previous sort of ups and downs before.
Why has production been down since February? I mean, it's
good question. Less mining, less minerals. You know, had the excavator.
Mining had been dropping off for months.
It's also the way they calculate it, right?
All right, here's my question: why has mining been dropping off for months?
No, you can't use excavators easily, and they've also just been nerfed directly.
Not since March, though.
The excavator nerf went in April. Yeah, so that's the drop off you see.
There's a big drop starting April, as you can see.
Once mining becomes less profitable, less people are willing to do it.
Well,
and they get slowly more and more.
That's my point.
It was correcting itself without the blackout, without the Sino changes. That was already happening. And then if you look at the middle of June, we come back from we get started in Tribute, but by the time you hit July, when we've come back, bang, everything's at levels you haven't seen.
But the problem with these numbers is also the fact that many of them are misrepresented and sensitive to the wrong type of variables, right? So the fact that they are using the mined values, then they're going to be dependent on existing stock and activity in the economy. And so it's not going to show activity reflected correctly.
Right. One of the other things to keep in mind is that prices on things like trit and other minerals have been going up since about March or so. So any increase in actual mining then shows as a much larger spike in value because it's more.
And vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Well, when did the market flood with trit prices hitting rock bottom? Was that a long time ago, or does that correspond with that?
2003.
No, like recently. I know it's gone up and down, but sometimes trit has been worth mining, and
it sunk down after around Christmas and winter last year, right?
Right. Yeah.
About that.
So right about
you can
here.
see those graphs on Celeste's, which is a website with all the historical ore prices.
Well, I would be interested to know if that downward slope was, I guess it was nerfing the high end mining that was there, but I wonder how that corresponds with the value of mining in general, like why that would dip off like that.
Well, it's usually based on activity, right? The fact that there's just too much mining going on compared to destruction. So that's usually when it crashes.
Well, but destruction has been, it's peaked even higher, and destruction's been pretty steady. You know, like in the middle of the thing, you can see that mining went way up and the destruction didn't actually go that far up. Anyway, again, MER is out.
But again, the problem is that it's not, the unit is wrong. If you're basing it on value, you're going to be sensitive to the decrease or increase of mining activity and the resulting price. Same with the faucets of ISK, right? If these change, then they're also going to impact the number that you see on destruction and the number you see on mining, because it's sensitive to ISK price and price finding. In short, CCP are giving us numbers that are wrong because they're not giving us the raw data.
Well, they are giving us the raw data, but that's just not the charts they're presenting.
Yeah, but they don't give us things like volumes and types. They give us price. That means that you're going to get it offset by value, right?
All right. So that is the MER that's out. We'll discuss that in more detail and look for more patterns this Sunday. Okay, so overall, the stream, did you guys find yourself encouraged or discouraged about EVE Online's development?
Completely meh.
I was very encouraged because they sort of reinforce this idea that they're treating EVE as a living thing.
It's worth noting that the MER-produced destroyed mines actually goes up until only 4 days ago, despite being ostensibly only for June.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I see.
Which one are you looking at? Which graph?
Produced destroyed mine to the CSV. I don't know whether the graph follows that. The last entry I see is 2019-08-19.
Yeah.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, is 4 days ago.
Yeah, the one from June also had part of July in it.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if this has changed, like where the destruction is. I would like to compare this to previous ones. Yeah, the Forge, Citadel, those are supply lanes, and those get ganked, and people get destroyed because they're war decked. So those are the highest almost always. But I wonder if they have been mitigated by some of the changes to war declarations. And then I want to see if low sec or even null sec has increased in comparison, because it has raw numbers.
Destruction is mainly like a factor of like people in space, and that's why the Forge and Citadel are so high, and Delve. If there's no one in space, destruction is going to be low, except for a big Titan fight or something.
Right, that's a good point, and it's easy to locate each other there if you were going to fight. I think if you're roaming around for an hour, and then you get 3 or 4 kills, it's like, okay, that's pretty low ticker. So I would like to see that compared to the months before. All right, so you guys were meh or?
Well, it's mixed feelings, right?
Yeah.
A lot of this is all mixed feelings because I was very hyped when I heard about I was talking to someone that plays a lot of mobile RTS games, especially space-related ones, and the potential of having something like Eve Echoes pretty much bring in a lot of fresh blood to Eve is really interesting. So I think that whole project will actually turn out really positive.
Mm-hmm.
I think the general feeling of what was launched or leaked on Hobo Leaks yesterday was really fucking interesting, with changes to Gita 4.4, with Triglavian dreads and all this stuff, right? Really, really interesting stuff. But every time I see some of these devs on stream, they kind of make me go like horrendous. Like, are you guys even understanding your own game, and stop using buzzwords like procedural generated and AI stuff, because that's not Eve. Eve is a PvP game. Everything is the sandbox.
I mean, not just that, but they were trying to attribute some of the stuff that they have as developers done to this living sandbox and self-adapt.
The obvious solutions. They recognize the problems, but they seem to want to not use the obvious solutions, like, say, deleting supers.
Oh, okay, that's a little bit extreme, but it's the Texas shooter fallacy, right? They keep doing this thing of, oh, we're going to change this, but they already have the trend line. It usually starts a month before they start saying they're going to change something. So of course they're going to be right, and they're basically using their stats completely wrong.
Can they steer the ship, or are they going to build rafts? You know, and there's nothing that they can do next week or next month that can just suddenly create 20,000 players interacting with the game.
Well, they get 20,000 players trying the game every week, so the work they're doing with new player experience, so it's actually more inviting to those players, and they're talking about actually directing new players to the plays in game that help get people set up and interested.
Yeah,
which is something very new as well.
They need to address skill points, don't they?
Yeah.
CCP has been working on the NPE on and off for years, right? Like, this is not really new.
But they've never talked about actually directing new players to the groups that help new players because they didn't want to show favoritism.
Yeah, Hilmar said something that was interesting, that he was very inspired by some of the old NPE. Like there were parts of it that were good. And on the interview that we did, he was saying like it's actually in a worse place now than it has been in the past because they've eliminated some parts of it to make it simpler, and it just isn't working. It wasn't coming together. So he must have explored what the NPE was like early on. And it was a much simpler game, he said. So it was a lot easier to get the basics. And now it's very complex, as complexity has grown over the years. To keep people interested, it's also grown in complexity when you start.
If you combine what he said today, right, with what Ghost said in Amsterdam, it sounds to me as if what they're trying to do with the new player experience and why they're dedicating all this dev hour time might be exactly what the player base needs, which is put the rails and push players into the existing player organizations, make that really effective. If that's the case, we might really see something good happening. It's just that they don't seem to be saying anything about how they're planning on doing this. They're not giving us even the slightest hint. But we have
said it was going to be in the
it.
agency, Caleb.
Yeah, but that's so vague, right? It's like,
everything's
give us some idea of what you're trying to do, because they gave all this data. They comment on how impressed they are at how the existing player groups are actually working with new players. I think he almost said that the existing big groups are doing better data analysis on players and player retentions and activating them and all this stuff than CCP could ever dream of.
I mean, the solution's obvious. They've got the mobile app now. You'll go into it and it will show the new players the different corporations that are available and what they're interested in. And then they can swipe left or swipe right depending on which one they want to join.
Is there a notes thing on this somewhere that I can look at?
It's worth noting that the economy, even in July, hasn't actually contracted. The money supply total is down, but that's only because of active ISK delta. It's actually still slightly inflating, even throughout July.
Well, yeah, but it's all on a relative basis. I mean,
well, if you look at ratting
I heard
numbers,
people say that it's been severely deflating for a while now.
It has. You see it coming off a cliff since what? June?
May. June.
Yeah, May, June, and starts crashing, crazy crashing, and it's actually players leaving. It's not faucet issues.
Yeah, Neuro, you've got to look at the money supply graph.
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah,
which they say is on a 3-month track, but everything we've found says it's probably only a 1 month.
I mean,
after 1 month they stop counting it.
Horrendous. Well, if that's a 3-month track, then I don't even want to see what comes after July starts counting into it, right?
Right. Activist delta is not very large for this month. There's 21 trillion. I've seen 60, 70.
Well, the ISK delta is negative. It's negative to 20 trillion, right? It's lapsed accounts from
but
it's
not uncommon for that to be negative much larger than 20
trillion. Well, that's usually tracking bans and people lapsing their account. And as far as I know, it's 3 months still, and I don't think they changed that. So this is 3 months ago that people either got banned or stopped playing.
In April, it was minus 51 trillion.
That minus 20 is tracking from May.
Yeah.
We have to wait till November to see August and October to see July's, right?
They've also banned 2,000 bots in July, so that's good as well.
Yeah. And that's going to show in July, which is a problem because then you get the other effect 3 months down the line.
Bouncy prices force it. Jesus.
And
You're
they've
gonna hunt
disassembled the Iron Crown Corporation, so a 250 member corporation.
To be clear, there is no corp called Iron Crown, not the one they're referencing at least. It's an alliance, so unless they've misspoken about a corp within the alliance,
It must
I
be
don't
a
know
corp
what the
within
hell
the
they're talking about.
alliance. There
That
are
was
active
the
kills for Iron Crown appearing right now.
That was the Titan that got shot in Uli during the event. That was the Iron Crown Titan.
Yes.
All right.
But it would have to be a corp within them. Sorry, Matt.
It's all right. Let me
No,
just
the Titan wasn't an
shift
Iron
over
Crown,
a
unless
second
Novel.
here. All right, hold on. We're going to transition over to Eve Portal because I got some information on that. So the main features for this application, and there was an Eve Portal. I think this is being enhanced. You will be able to do skill management with this. You'll be able to see what's new in New Eden. And there'll be an activity feed with push notifications. I believe that would probably tie in, yes, to calendar. So it'll have the calendar in there as well, as corporations have calendars. You can schedule things that you need to do. And then it'll also handle mail, which I think is the handiest of most of this thing. But now skill management is in there. That kind of helps. The other thing is, in the future, possibly in the future, there may be a way of handling some aspects of the game that can lend themselves to a different medium, like a cell phone or something, and that would be like PI, for instance. So that's Eve Portal, and that has been announced at FanFest at home. Okay, we'll get back to the live stream and quick TLDR for some of the things that were said there. Somebody want to help me out with this? All right. Well, I'll go in backwards order because I'm Pacific time, so I woke up to pretty much the last 20 minutes of it. And
can we do the elephant in the room?
Yes, I've been wanting to do elephants in rooms. What's the elephant in the room?
Where is CCP Manbjörn?
Well, not everybody's going to Finland for this FanFest.
But it would have been nice to have heard from him once since he became EP.
Well, what about Orca? She's also, it's a triumvirate. It's not really any one person. The person who is outgoing and the face of it, and you can tell if you talk to them in person, is Berger, who's sitting there on screen with Hilmar. He's outgoing, he's funny, he's engaging, and I think he's comfortable doing that. He's also the guy that was Angry Concord Man, so he can ham it up in front of an audience, and there's a dog in the background. Manbjörn, if you've ever met him, is incredibly shy. And he may have opted to say, I'm going to sit in the background and manage this sort of stuff. You go out front. And Orca is also probably prefers to just cede that presentation part to Berger.
Well, I mean,
given the triumvirate, is the EP, right?
Given the triumvirate that they have put in place, right? You've got the EP, which I don't think means what the EP used to mean,
right?
Then you've got Berger as the creative director, which is kind of the person that players want to hear from in terms of what's going on with the game. But quite honestly, at that point, I think he has been subbed down by whatever the hell it is Hilmar is doing. Now maybe all Hilmar is doing these days is more chaos as he walks into the room or whatever, and then it gets taken over by Berger, who's more kind of the vision and creative director, as his title would imply, and Orca is marketing. They've got the triumvirate, which is basically the leadership team, but even at this point, I don't know how that works with Hilmar going into God mode.
Yeah. Literally.
Well, it could also, I mean, we don't know. We don't work there. And the people who do work there can't really say, I suppose. But we don't know if Hilmar comes in, pounds the table and says, let's make this game hard. Let's do this. Let's do that. We don't know if that's what happens. It could be a group effort where they sit and say, what do we think is some of our roadblocks and how do we get past them? And it could be a group effort. We really don't know how it's done. But
what we're told in the Rise interview.
Basically just tell you guys that, yeah, Hilmar came back home and flipped tail.
He didn't say that, and he said it was a series of meetings where, yeah, it might have been that Hilmar led those meetings in a strong way and said, "This is what we're going to do," or it might have been something that was done in the group.
And like you specifically asked him, so he basically came home with an axe and said,
"Yeah,
we're going to be Vikings," and Rise said, "Yeah, that's pretty."
Yeah, but
and I think you also called him a name on stream live.
Yeah, he's like Crazy Zanny, and that's good.
Lovable lunatic or something, right?
Yeah. But I think Rise says things in a joking way sometimes. Sometimes he's ironic, and so it was not necessarily something you could take literally. Oh, the stream is stalling.
But from what we know historically of Hilmar's behavior, how can you not take it literally?
Well, I don't know all the details about Hilmar or Torfi and that stuff and what they were like. I don't. I have dealt with them like all of us have dealt with them. It's looking at them from looking at what they do from afar, from streams and from reading and stuff like that.
Well, it's not necessarily negative. I'm not saying this is a negative thing. This might be just what CCP needs, but the point is that it is happening. Let's not try to hide that.
Well, I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm just saying we don't know. We know he's definitely a strong voice. He came on and he's the one that announced we're in an era of darkness. The
Chaos.
I keep calling it darkness. Yeah. Era of chaos. And he said, the influence comes from the three body problem book. And that when for these people, when these humans, when the three suns line up, chaos ensues and they enter that. And he said Eve is in an era where that is the case, where you have really weird forces at work on the place. And that's what we've entered. And it means that they're not going to sit there and think tank Eve Online and expect the results, because they're usually not accurate, because it's hard to figure out what thousands of people are going to do. So instead, they're going to do experiments, and with those experiments, collect data to do further experiments and create hypothesis. That's era of chaos, and that is difficult for advanced players, veteran players. It's going to be difficult. They're not going to be able to be comfortable at the highest levels of the game. It's going to be very uncomfortable at the highest levels of the game. And you can choose to go into a lower part of the game if it's too uncomfortable at the top. It's too hot in the kitchen, you can actually get out into the side room and dining room or whatever. And then for the new players, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more attention paid to that sort of experience. That's what he announced. Yeah, he put that forward. I don't know how much input the three executive producers had in that, but we're in a different place. We were in a different place when Guard was the community manager, right? He was the personality of the place. Before him was Nathan, who was the executive producer. So it's been shifting on whoever's best available or best able to deal with the public, or who likes to deal with the public. And I think Berger really likes being out front. He's shown that even when he wasn't creative director, executive producer.
I think, as they explained during the live stream, they can say on a high level the things that they think are problems and the direction that they want to see Eve go in, but it's down to the talented people that work at CCP to implement the changes. And that's what they're providing, which is very good for Eve, a direction.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what comes from the top, right? You say, we're sailing in that direction because we think there's new land over there. And then the navigator says, okay, well, how do I get us going in that direction? And then the guy who runs the ropes or whatever figures out, like, well, how can I turn the equipment to make it go in that direction? Like, that's how these things must work. What I thought was interesting... Go ahead, please, Lux.
But instead of sitting and having meetings about steering the ship, they're there at the rudder trying it.
Yeah, and this is back to the whole joke with Classic Eve and why I'm not necessarily thinking this is a bad thing that we have Hilmar actually doing something. I do think he might need to read up on the game a little bit more than just crawling around a wormhole and then deciding to nerf everything left, right, and center. But at least this is the guy that was the original core that designed this game. So we might get something more resembling Classic Eve. So this is maybe what the doctor orders. But I think take a minute, talk to people, and stop with the nerf bat, please.
Well, anyway, so as Lex was saying, that's how I think that this is the near future of Eve is going to be run, which is uncomfortable for players who rely on information so they can make plans on how to adapt. But
you don't want to lose these players. You've just said that these are the players that improve player retention. If you then scare them away, you're going to have a huge problem with player retention, right?
I don't know if they're the same players that help player retention. I don't, because some of the people complaining, I don't know how many proteges they have. Some of the people complaining that organized people who are complaining, I don't know how many proteges they have. It could be that when you join the game, you join a small group, and those are the guys that are helping people into the game. I don't think you're chasing off Eve Uni. I don't think you're chasing off Eve Uni with these changes, Caleb.
Who was the player that Hilmar named who said it single-handedly brought 10,000 players into the game?
Grey Gal.
Yeah.
Grey Gal.
Wow, didn't know that. Yeah. Grey Gal is not part of nullsec, and I don't think she's quitting because of chaos. I don't know that, but I don't think so.
How do they do that? Does anyone know?
Well, she's big on Facebook, I think, and she actually has a new bro alliance, and she takes in new people, and she does a ton of work at Eve Vegas and I think maybe other fan fests, but she coordinates the volunteers for the fan fest in Vegas. So she has a lot of exposure. Carneros?
She also organized the Alaska Eve cruise, or helped organize it in something. I think she was one of the team that did that.
Yeah. There's also another, Grey Gal's amazing if you get a chance to meet her, do that. There's also a guy that is a Spanish speaker that has brought in a ton of Spanish-speaking players to EVE Online. We haven't done any stories or anything like that on him, but he was talked about by several different people. He has like a show or a podcast or something that just reaches people, and he's brought in a ton of people. When you ask somebody that speaks Spanish in EVE Online, like, how did you hear about the game? It's usually this one guy. That's very interesting. Nobody knows about him.
But at least
the 40 people that voted for him for CSM now.
Well, he didn't run for CSM.
That wasn't that guy?
No. It's not anybody that we've had on or talked about in the past. In fact, those are the guys that tell me that they got in because of this guy.
But there's like 20,000 players in Null that's being retained by Null.
20,000.
Why are we ignoring that fact? They are playing for more than a year, more than 3 years.
Well, you don't know some of the stuff you say. You can't know. You don't know how long nullsec players have been in the game.
Exactly what Ghost told us based on his statistics that he gathered himself. Are you now not trusting CCP themselves?
Well, I do trust CCP. I'll go and listen to that again. I didn't hear that. But second of all, 20,000 players in nullsec. Are you sure that's accurate?
Well, there's 10,000 in just goons.
10,000 accounts or players?
Players.
There's not 10,000.
Much more accounts.
No, there's not.
It's 5,000, guys. It's 5,000.
It's like 5,000. It's like 10,000. Call everybody in and see how many people you get. You will not get 10,000 people. And that's the biggest group in EVE Online. NC is much smaller than that. PL is tiny compared to that. And the nullsec groups they outsize themselves in visibility, and they outsize themselves in this kind of coverage, and they outsize themselves in opinions as well.
They outsize themselves in the type of activity that CCP was pushing for 16 years, or maybe 15 and a half now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of self-celebration too, right? Like, oh, look at us on screen. Look at us here. Look at us there. It's a lot of self-celebration as well. And that's okay if you're trying to sell that to the wider audience. I was just talking to, I think it was Keyboard, about this and how there hasn't been a spike over battles since the 9GC fight, the $1 million battle. And that was a dud, right? On paper, it was a dud. If you were listening to the media talking about EVE Online, a game that you didn't know anything about, there was going to be $1 million fight, and it was like a $20,000 fight, right? As far as losses. And after that, there hasn't been anything.
Keep in mind two important things. All right? First, there really hasn't been a massive thing lately.
There
and
was
second,
the massive
2018 was massive.
No, it was not. It was not. I remember when we were talking about it, I mentioned that it's not the event that brings players in. It's the media coverage, the real world media coverage that brings players in, the publicity. So whatever event happens has to be big enough for real media to pay attention to it. 2018 was quote unquote big inside EVE, but it's not massive enough for media, real media, to actually look at it.
So attention drivers.
Exactly. Therefore, you won't get any people in.
Okay, so attention drivers.
We have enough people trying the game anyway, or certainly we have plenty of people trying the game anyway.
There's
We don't
60,000
keep
a week, yeah.
right? Like, why do we need more media coverage? If we kept even 2%, 5% of all the people that came in, the game size would be ballooning.
I would
And
answer
this is
that
without any special media coverage.
I know why. Because your question was, why do we want more media coverage? Because that 2% gets bigger the more people you have. If you have 10,000 people, 2% is 100 people, 200 people. If you have a million people, a million players trying to join, the 2% is a lot bigger, and it's around 10,000.
You're bringing in
Get
players
retention
who
and
are inherently more uninterested because they required this special media attention to be brought in the first place.
Well, yeah, and they've never been
that
able to
get brought in by this
capitalize.
coverage
They've never been able to
inherently
capitalize on that at
Well,
all, no matter
but that-
whether it was big giant battles or it was, I don't know, whatever the other type of attention is. That
A number of people in this room came in from media attention on specific things.
Yes, yes. I'm not
That's
saying
the 2% he's
haven't.
talking about. That is the 2% that he's talking about, right? We already overly estimated that 98% would not be there, and we can argue the numbers, but let's assume it's 2% that actually retains. The more players you have, the more that bigger 2% is, and that just gets more player into the game until you hit a critical mass. That word of mouth is enough to keep people bringing in without you needing to rely on big attention.
There's a problem with
Media.
that, though. You have to keep in mind that EVE is not a game for everyone. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody here can agree on that EVE is rather niche. So yeah, sure, you're going to get more people, but you're not going to get the kids playing Fortnite. You're not going to get the people who want to play Call of Duty first-person shooters. You're not going to get really the Twitch gamers either. There's a lot of crowds that are very popular, very big, that just flat out will have zero interest in EVE because it's not their thing.
That's counted. Yeah, that's counted in the 98% that we just already said we're gonna assume we're not gonna get. We're talking about a 2% retention after 100. After everybody looking at it, so we're already counting for all that in the 98%, basically.
But if they keep talking about Little League, right, and then they take a nerf bat to the Super League, that makes no fucking sense to me.
Well, I mean, when was the last time Null decided to really throw down and make these big news events? I'm sure you can say, yeah, sure, right before Blackout started all the shit with the Drifters, but at the same point in time, where's been all these big fights from Null in the last 6 months?
You know where they are?
That's CCP's design. The fact that they've made it so fucking dumb and easy.
They're all in high sec.
If you're interested,
they're gone because CCP fucked it up.
If you're interested in getting more players into EVE, CCP are doing exactly the right thing. They're making the first experiences you have when you come into EVE better, and they're trying to direct those players to corporations that will support them and groups that will support them, places where they can make friends.
I would say
making the community fits. They're making a mobile game where you might see people coming across from that, and when they eventually do Project Nova, you'll probably see people coming from that as well.
I would say
one day they might even revisit Incarna, which will massively broaden the appeal of the game.
I would say that what you're saying is there's a lot of truth to that, but you're missing the piece. They're increasing the number of players, not raw count of players trying the game. They're trying to increase that 2% that we're talking about. Instead of being 2%, they're trying to increase that to 5%, 10%. Again, we're throwing numbers out here. We don't have the exact numbers, but that's what you're trying to do with those changes you're referring to. That's the difference when you have a big event. And I want to emphasize that a big event is not necessarily a null battle. It has to be an event big enough that the regular media will pay attention to it.
They lose 94% of the 12 to 20,000 players that try Eve.
Okay, so 6%.
That's the same in all games.
Yeah,
just in a week. That's just after a week. If you look after a month, right?
Well, if we're looking,
and the
if
answers
we're looking
to
at
making
the numbers they gave out at Amsterdam, let's
But
keep it.
If you look at how many active players are in Eve, that's a massive amount compared to how many players are active in Eve.
If we're looking at the numbers they gave at Amsterdam that set up that whole here's our retention percentages discussion, all right, then we have to ask ourselves, what point are the 16,000 who try the game actually at in that? Because if they're at the 100% level, that's 8,000 a week who actually try the game, because 50% of them never make it to first login.
That's real quick. I think on screen you're seeing the guy in the white T-shirt there. It looks like Steven Mesner, PC Gamer.
Yeah, I'm assuming that CCP flew him in. I cannot believe that PC Gamer would have flown him over there.
Yeah, he's panned a couple things that CCP's trying to put out. I think that's him. I can't tell for sure, but
it is Mesner.
Yeah.
His articles are usually quite negative about everything.
Yeah.
And usually factually incorrect as well.
Well, the player stuff is harder to get, but yeah.
When as is most stuff written by the gaming media related to this game. Because they
don't have reference points.
They don't. Yeah, exactly.
So are CCP staying in this guy's guest rooms, or like what?
This is a fan fest, and they might have a few media people there, and he's one of them.
So I'm just saying, are CCP sleeping in the guy's guest rooms, or
well, they're naked in his sauna apparently.
This is ridiculous.
It's supposed to be. It's a.
Eve is like the caged animal of the gaming world. Everyone just sort of looks at it and is like, "Oh wow, look at that," but sort of always from afar, never really quite understanding it.
What a curiosity piece.
If you've
never much how it's treated by the media.
If you've never been to Finland, sauna is completely normal there and part of everyday life. I did a speaking tour once for a software company, and we all and everyone on stage who got up and presented at it ended up in the sauna together afterwards, and that's just Finland for you. Completely normal. Don't project your own country's ways on that and say that's normal or not normal. That's not useful.
Yeah.
I'm not judging that. I'm just judging the idea of this at someone's house.
One of the great things about EVE Online when I started playing it was the feeling of how international it was. The game itself was the game, but I could just sense that people were attracted to this game from all over the world. And that felt a lot different than games I was playing before.
Definitely.
You actually can learn a lot of cultural changes between the people that you talk to. Because somebody from North America will have totally different culture than European people, And we just had an example, what Carneros just said about people in Finland. They like the sauna thing.
I would say that, lots of games have this international appeal. I think Eve is exceptional in that it actually gets all these international people together. It gets them talking more. It gets them jetting all over the world to various fan fests, which you won't really see with a lot of other games, etc.
They exchange flus.
Yeah, but Eve is
they're
something
vectors of disease, if you think about it.
Eve is something that other MMOs don't have. Most MMOs that you play, they will separate the Americans with the Europeans, with the Asians. There will be specific servers for those people. While Eve is a one-shard server for the entire world, no matter where you're from, aside from Serenity, obviously.
Well, the reason a lot of those servers have to do that is because ping, like latency in general. Eve kind of cheats by having the server ticks set up how they are.
Well, anyway, so the point is that there's
Well, Eve isn't exactly a Twitch reflex game, so
Yeah,
you can do it with actually quite high latency.
this.
It is not.
All right, right. The point is the Finnish Fan Fest is a private fan fest, and they're doing some cultural things there, and it looks foreign to some people, but it's actually very much a part of the culture. And again, that is part of EVE Online. It's bringing people together from all over the world.
What's going on right now is Bob Barbecue by CCP.
Well, yeah. So explain.
Cultural thing that goes on all over the world.
Okay, so for people who aren't familiar, Bob was Band of Brothers, which was an alliance early on that was very powerful. They used to have a barbecue. I think it was in Scandinavia when it started, where they would gather and talk about how they were going to dominate the game, and that's always happened.
And Sir Muller would prance around in a pink hat, and yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if I was invited to the Bob barbecue, I would be like, why would I do that? If I was invited to go to Mexico to go yachting with the head of Goon Swarm, and I would think, why would I do that? But a fan fest, I think, is different because it's almost like it's almost like it's almost like neutral ground. You're there to kind of like be a student of the game, and that's what appeals to me. Actually,
okay, but I mean, there's a bit of disconnect there, though. I mean, one of these things that you're talking about, or rather two of these things you're talking about, are fundamentally, hey, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And the other one is going to an event for them.
Yes, totally different. Yeah, totally different.
So it's like, okay, so let's compare. Do you want to go to the school play, or do you want to run for Congress? They're just completely different things.
They are completely different. And I'm saying that I would want to hang out or go to a fan fest with the possibility of meeting new people, because it's a different thing than going to vacation with friends, because that's a totally different thing too. You're right.
But this proves that it's not that different. It's not huge different. There's huge overlaps between the two, right? This is what you're seeing now. You're pretty much having a CCP event doing what would be considered a player gathering. And the CCP events usually turn out to be very player gathering-esque.
Okay, maybe you see it that way. I see it as a retreat for a company, basically, but a relaxing retreat. Lux, what were you saying? I cut you off.
I was just going to say there's remarkable similarities between Congress and a children's play. It's not a very good example.
Nice.
Well, anyway.
Yes, but one you pay to get into, the other people pay you to get in.
So no, you pay to get into both.
So we have a whole crop of new viewers. Can we go back real quick and talk about some of the big things that were mentioned during the stream as people are waking up across the United States?
Well, big hints about changes to asset safety, particularly in relation to the transfer of very large items like supers and Titans.
By the way, did he hint at that, or did he say that was a problem they were looking at, or what was the extent
of it? He specifically mentioned Titans, that he doesn't like the fact that a ship the size of an Afterhouse can be stored in asset safety indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yes, there was also a brief mention of upkeep costs.
Okay. One of the things that he has talked about before is that he did not like the idea that NPC stations had unlimited storage, or that you can actually get around corporate storage limits. Actually, office rental, you could get around it using corporate delivery system, which is actually something I do. I don't know if you're not supposed to do that. I'm pleading innocence if it's an exploit, but you can basically have something delivered to your corporation, and it would be stored in the station that you ask for it in, and it doesn't count towards any rental that you might have. So people can use that in GDA.
Wasn't the asset safety thing for Titans and Supers originally supposed to be set up so that you could only asset safety those things if there was another keep star in the system?
I don't know how many iterations it went through at the
No, that was for free.
very beginning.
Like if you had another structure and system, then it would go there and it would go there
Almost
fairly rapidly at no cost, right?
Yeah, right.
But if you
5%.
didn't, then it could asset safety to the nearest low.
Does it have to be a keep style, or can you asset safety
No.
it into a structure that can
Any
also
structure.
democratize?
Any structure.
That's pretty broken. Well,
Yeah.
asset safety's always been fairly broken, but
Yeah, so
Well,
you're right.
asset safety as a concept is not broken. It is something that we fundamentally have had here for forever for a variety of reasons. The way they implemented asset safety that we know today, there are elements of it that probably are broken. And but what you tend to hear from people out there is let's not talk about the nuances of this. Let's just delete asset safety.
I mean, I would like to point out that wormholes have not had asset safety, and while I don't think removing it from nullsec is necessarily a good idea, I mean, it's not game breaking. It just means you have to defend a lot harder.
Oh, I think it will. I think it will destroy. It will allow the destruction of a lot of people's situations. Let's call them situations. The homes that they've built. I think there's no reason not to think that there will be a pillage party if asset safety goes away.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
The big thing that differs wormholes wormholes lacking asset safety and what would happen if nullsec suddenly lacked asset safety is in wormholes we can't bring in 1,000 titans and hit everything in your hole simultaneously.
you can bring 1,000 ravens in though.
If you take a year.
It doesn't take that long, and if you look at recent big evictions, even Rage, they just built like 300 ravens in one night. It was not a big deal.
Then why didn't they do it?
It took a year
did.
preparation. It took a year preparation for them to do that. The building of ravens didn't took a year. It's the preparation to do that took a year.
No, they literally built the ravens overnight.
Again, but the preparation in order to do that took a year.
And
Putting all the places in place.
Part of that was secrecy. I'm not saying delete asset safety. I don't think that nullsec is in the same position that wormhole space is. Like, for example, if you do blow up something and you get a metric load of assets out of something in wormholes, it takes time to get those to a new location. Whereas nullsec, you can pretty much move those assets instantly, and I think it would be very bad in just. I can only imagine what would happen if you blew up a major citadel and you just had like 100 titans drop. That's 100
They
titans to
crash.
throw at whatever the next fight is, and I think that nullsec would be at a big risk of a cascade if you remove asset safety entirely.
It's worth noting that wormholes have a very high inherent defensive advantage that null doesn't have to that extent. And also, people do go around bashing at shit in wormholes all the time for the loot.
Yeah, we've got 3 things that we've killed recently and more that we're going back for. But I'm saying in nullsec, it seems like it's a lot bigger of a risk, and it might not be a good idea, despite the fact that, in theory, I love the idea.
The problem is that CCP does not have the ability to really have good experience with nullsec gameplay. And then listening to Reddit or wormhole lobbyists about changes to null makes no sense at all.
I love the implication about wormhole lobbyists when the CSM has been null dominated for many, many years.
Yeah, I think somewhat they have to look at that and say, well, this is a point of view collectively.
It's true. It's true at the CSM because it's been fucking lobbying for quality of life stuff in null that's pretty much broken the game. So I agree with that. It's just that gameplay wise, you don't want wormholers to decide how fucking null should change.
CSM has been null dominated for years. But I want to point out, all right, when things came through last year that were going to upset the wormholers, all right, that the wormholers got really upset about, it was a null guy on the CSM who went to bat for them.
That's because there was no wormhole guy on the CSM to do so.
That's right, but it doesn't. But that doesn't mean that the null guys were immediately like, "Oh well, hey, fuck wormholes."
Which null guy are you talking about?
Brisk.
Yeah, he got overrun by the other null guys though.
No, he didn't. The
sure
change.
He did.
No, he didn't. Hicks got their module.
They got it later.
He brought up.
They got it because he pushed for it, though.
Yeah.
They weren't going to get it.
No, Rise said
get
that,
it all.
Well,
Rise said that they knew about that and they were working on something to fix that, but they still rolled out the change early.
In the initial announcement, CC acknowledged that they knew this gameplay was lacking,
Yeah.
and this was before like other people knew about it and had time to get
That was after the summit in which Brisk had defended them.
You guys realize the irony of this is that CCP has basically announced that that's what they don't want for wormhole space, but they put it in the game because the players asked
they
for
want
it.
less control. Right. That's one of the things that came out in this Fanfest is that Hilmar or CCP doesn't like the idea that wormholers can control their entrances and exits so easily. They really have mastered that. It was ingenious sci-fi, which I really am a big fan of, but they have really mastered how to control entrances into their home or not.
It's just a matter of math. We had this down to a science in 2009.
Mm-hmm. It may have been a problem since then, but it seems like it's something that's on their radar. We didn't even know it was a problem. We thought maybe it was just strategic gameplay, but
the point is that a lot of these things that have accumulated over time seem like very small effect quality of life changes, and the arguing for each change was easy. But when you see them in combination and over time, they broke the game.
Honestly, I hope they kind of do something about it, although it's going to be very weird if they do put holes on a cooldown, which just from what very little I've heard on this sounds like that might be their idea. That's going to kind of help null in a way because it's going to get the rage rolling down. So you're not going to have people rage rolling their nullsec hole looking for content.
What do you mean
Do you mean a cool? I think he means a cooldown in between a static respawning.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing.
Currently, it's basically instant.
It is.
But isn't that a defensive advantage because you don't want your static to spawn and be activated if you're trying to lock down a...
Well, right now what you can do, and I personally don't think this is really good, is if you roll a hole, if you do not initiate warp to that hole, it will not spawn for X amount of time. And it can be up to 4 hours where it will not spawn. There is a bit of interesting math on it. The other side of that hole will spawn with I forget what the math is, but it'll spawn with increasing likelihood. But you can still go 4 hours with your hole shut down where nobody can find the entrance into your hole.
Right.
And
but
that should kind of be changed.
If you add a cooldown to that, then that's just longer. I mean, again, I know what you're talking about. Like I said, we were doing this in 2009 in holes. So
yeah,
it just adding a more of a delay just means you can secure your hole longer. So I don't know that a cooldown here is really...
Well, because it also stops people rage rolling into your hole, and usually they can get through faster than you can roll it out.
The point is that many of these things are based on code that's semi-static and easy to game. And what CCP needs to do is, instead of talking about procedural content, they need to talk about procedural conditions. So everything is conditioned on another activity in game, because that means that you cannot game it.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, what I've suspected based on the recent change to drifter holds is just that they're going to add a lot more roaming holes to everything and leave the statics as it. I think people talk a lot about random mass changes. I don't see that. I mean, I guess you could go for that. I don't think that'd be very healthy, to be honest. But
because if the condition was in game, right? If another player's activity on rolling holes basically fuck up a player on the other side of the universe, you can't do this on any spreadsheet because you don't know who's doing what right now in space.
Yeah, that sort of system might be interesting, although it would be bit of a challenge to implement in a way that still wouldn't be gamed somehow.
Random mass would also backfire in the fact. Sorry.
Go ahead, finish your last point.
Random mass would also backfire in how mass works as it is, unless they change how wormholes are labeled. Like, if it's at stage 1, it's anywhere down to 50% mass. So pretty much, even without knowing the mass, you roll it until you get that 50%, and then you know roughly what the mass is left. So you can work that down to the crit stage, which is less than 10%, and then just take it. So making it a random mass sounds like it'll work in theory, but in practice, all it does is slow down the roll. And that's if you don't care if something rolls out.
Because you can only determine half of the mass depending on the sort how much mass you're putting through each time, as in you don't know how far over that 50% you've gone, unless it's a really high mass hole, in which case the mass you're putting through is irrelevant compared to the total. So I imagine you'd still probably get more battleships and Hicks rolled out by accident. I'm not sure if that's really a good thing for the game though.
Okay.
I mean
that's
I'm going
narrow.
to pull us out of the weeds. Sorry, because we're in deep wormhole weeds, which is great. But I think what we want to do is get reactions to FanFest in Finland here, which is a very intimate FanFest. You can see on screen you have Hilmar and CCP Berger, the creative director, talking. What was the biggest thing that you guys came away with here? What was maybe the biggest thing that was announced, if anything?
The idea of not having
God doesn't make roadmaps. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. I like you said this. What was it? And now spiders fly. That was something the audience said.
I think the idea that I get is to be sort of more reactive, because a roadmap locks you into a change without knowing what previous changes that you would have made based on that roadmap would affect the outcome of that change. And
but you can still do some sort of roadmap. You can still do a concept roadmap, things that you are intending on bringing in, and then it can be discussed along the way whether it's possible or complete pie in the sky thing.
Right, a roadmap doesn't lock you into anything. The only thing
I think what they mean when they say a roadmap is one that locks you into.
Hold on, Nero. Let Artemis let Arendis finish, and then you can go. Thanks.
A roadmap doesn't lock you into anything. A roadmap is only a map. It doesn't force you to make decisions. The only thing that locks people into anything is an unwillingness to actually critically examine what they're doing and adapt.
I don't.
That's the context he was talking about it in.
I don't know what roadmaps you guys saw along the lines that had highly specific details about what those things meant. I mean, when they sit there and they talk about things like we're going to be getting rid of stations and replacing that, pauses and then ultimately stations that all got lumped into it, and working on this thing out here. Like there weren't details associated with that until they got way further into it. I mean, the roadmaps that they put out were fairly big picture.
It's different in terms of what they have internally versus what they show to us. I'm pretty certain what was discussed here was what they have internally as well as what's being shown to us.
Correct.
But what he was talking about was the stuff they're showing to us, or at this point, not showing to us.
They've never really showed us a roadmap.
No,
not in a concrete
we
way.
had a period there. We had a period there where they went through the roadmap phase, okay, which they probably shouldn't have done if it wasn't going to be something that they were going to kind of, sort of keep updating with 3 to 5 year sort of, play out stuff, right? Because it mismanaged expectations once again.
What roadmap are you talking about?
We didn't have the ones that began with Seagull, basically.
Okay.
The roadmaps, like the only ones that ever existed.
They were big picture things, but
for us,
they were only big picture.
But that's exactly what just happened in Finland. It was a 3-hour discussion of big picture things for developing Eve. Was it not?
Well, okay, let's just.
Not really.
I think people are saying that there is a difference, and clearly there is. But what is the difference between what Siegel announced as a roadmap and what Hilmar has been announcing in the last few weeks?
Because this is vague posting, right?
One big difference was Hilmar basically saying we don't want to have plans for the future. We just want to react to now. Seagull presented, listen, this is the direction we'd like to take Eve. That's a plan for the future.
Okay, what's the different? Why do you need a plan for the future of EVE Online? Typically, why does a player need that, not you necessarily?
Well, because it keeps you interested, even though you might be displeased with some issues in the game, because you have something to look forward to. This was the main problem with the Summer of Rage. We used to have a roadmap prior, and the vision was completely unrealistic, right? And it ended up being completely impossible to even deliver on half of those things. So everyone got angry and pretty much rage quit the game. When Siegel took over, her roadmap was something that made more sense and was actually attainable, right? It would take a long time to adapt to all the changes that she wanted in the game, but at least there was a vision. I'm just saying this is something that keeps people playing. The problem is if you do not deliver and you break people's dreams, then you have an issue.
Right.
I think that there are also three different things that you can kind of point to, okay, about setting future expectation management that, look, hey, everybody, this is a game that evolves and, out into the future, okay? We used to have really piss poor expectation management when it came to CCP Presents, and they put out a freaking video at FanFest that 5 years later people are going, where is any of that? Whatever happened to that giant Stargate thing? And remember crap like that. Then you had kind of the roadmap thing that CCP Seagull sort of put into place that was generally vague, but it was very big. We are going to be focusing our efforts in these areas. Didn't tell you what exactly the details of that were going to be, but it gave you an idea of where they, as the developer, were going to be spending a predominant portion of their resources. And now what you have is something that I think may be somewhat worse, because all it is just talk.
Can we just mention that Star Citizen is pretty much kickstarted a quarter of the entire revenue of CCP's history for pipe dreams and roadmaps.
Sure. The chat wants to know. Go ahead, Arendis, and I need to break in.
As far as why it matters to the players, why CCP having a roadmap, and that fact, not necessarily what it is, but just that fact being communicated to the players matters to players, is because unlike a lot of other games out there, Eve is not a short-term game. The stuff you're doing in Eve, yes, okay, we'll go for Rome. There are short-term activities you do, but the majority of the stuff that players are looking at as far as the direction they want to take their stuff, that's all long-term planning. And if you're going to make a long-term investment in the game, which you have to, then really you need to know that CCP has a long-term investment in the game, as opposed to just, we're going to flail around and see what happens. That needs to be communicated, that CCP actually has some idea of what's going to happen.
Well, that attitude's going to need to change, because CCP's plan is to make the game more dynamic, which will make it harder to make long-term plans.
Right.
You'll need to be adapting.
Do you have a skill
and
queue?
Long-term planning won't be the secret sauce that makes you win the game.
Do you have a skill queue? You, personally, on your character?
No, I don't.
He has banked
don't
SP.
have anything in training.
What a stupid question. What's that got to do with long-term planning?
Well, he's saying you're...
What?
You can change your skill queue, right?
But first of all, there is no need to attack people. So let's not refer to
anyone.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that let not everybody attack anybody. Saying stupid questions is not a good idea. So let's keep it civil, guys.
Thanks, keyboard. Okay, I'm gonna change gears. We'll come back to this.
Well, hold on. Let's Arendis finish his question.
All right, go ahead.
That was my point. Even if the only long-term planning you're doing is setting up your skill queue, you've got an idea for where you
change a skill queue.
And yes, you can, and they can change their long-term plans too. But it's helpful to communicate we have one, as opposed to we're just going to react.
They have communicated it, you just aren't able to listen because they're saying things that you do not want to hear.
I would not say that that's what it is at all.
And they have only vague posted on this. They've only said something, and they can easily just turn around and say, no, that's not what we meant, or that's not what we said. It's just at least commit to it, right? Put it out there. Put it in a roadmap. If you think that is where you want to trend the game, why not say so openly? Why are you putting it in secret comms and streams, or on talk shows that 50% of the player base don't actually follow? That's just dumb.
Even better, if you want to make it democratic, is don't release a roadmap at all, because that's perfectly democratic.
Carneros? Sorry, that's not Carneros.
Lux, I'm listening differently from other people because I'm listening as a game dev, and I'm not hearing them say a vision. It's not a case of not wanting to hear what they're saying.
The only
I hear a vision in there, and I don't know how you guys can't see it.
I'm hearing desperation. That's what I'm hearing. They're looking for short-term, big bang fixes to shake things up. That's what they're communicating. They're not communicating a 6-month, 12-month, 3-year, 5-year plan. They're communicating a 6-week, 3-week, 1-week vision of how we're going to change and mess things up.
The vision, the only thing that I can think it could be considered as a vision is chaos. That's what Hilmar went to the interview and said, we're gonna do an era of chaos, and that is vision. That I want to throw this into disarray, and if that's a vision, that means that everything is on the table. You can flip tables, you can set the building on fire, you can do whatever you want, because what your goal is to have chaos.
What about their discussions of developing things for mobile? What about their discussions of AR and VR and the things that they want to do?
Not EVE related. Not EVE related. Not EVE
related. It is EVE related because it's
IP related.
System.
It's IP related. It's not EVE as a game related. EVE as a game doesn't have a roadmap right now or a plan forwards.
If it relates to EVE, they need to explain how it relates to EVE. They need to say, okay, we're doing this because we actually want to get people introduced to the IP so we can eventually convert that into players of, say, EVE Online or other brands and actually increase our revenue. And then show some expectations and numbers, because you can't do this vague posting. That's like me saying, oh, I want to be a millionaire. How are you going to do that? I don't know. I just want to sell stuff. Chaos.
They talk
regarding
the
mobile.
Occlusion.
So regarding the mobile client, they've already announced that is not going to be the main game affecting. It's not going to interact with that at all. So that's okay. They're developing a mobile game, and it's completely separate to this discussion. Augmented reality, again, it's a nice technology to experiment with, but it's going to be along the lines of something like eValkyrie, where it's going to be a tech demo / branch off that may not 6, 12, 18, 5 years down the road become sort of impactful to the main game, but it's not going to be something that's going to be dedicated to the main game in the near future.
What about what they're doing with Hadian to look at basically what happens behind the scenes in EVE, so they can add more features in that can't currently be in the game?
But they've already explained that that's completely experimental and is more of a pipe dream than this is going to be in place in 2021. It's a case of it looks good, it sounds good, it's giving us promise. That's what we want to aim for.
And again, why don't you listen to your player base, your existing player base, when you're rolling out new brands, right? That are basically going to be based on the same IP. Talk to your existing player base and stop doing things that they say this is going to fail if you do that. The whole thing with the exclusive PlayStation thing, with Dust, the thing with VR before a PC version, they just do things upside down because they don't listen to the existing player base. That's both their ambassadors and their potential customers.
But every time they come up with something that they're going to do, the EVE player base shits all over it. They would never do anything if they listened to the EVE player base.
That's not true. They've been hyped about all of these projects. They've just pointed out there's some flaws you need to consider first. Stop burning my graphics card because I can't run this. I know you guys have rigs that cost $10,000 or $20,000, but I can't afford that in my home. So please don't introduce this high-end carbon engine that's going to make it impossible for me to run 3 clients. Don't introduce this VR. I can't afford this yet. Nobody is buying this except the extreme high-end gamers, right? This is not a good market to go into. Start it on a PC. All your player base will try it, promote it, and actually push it, then put the VR on top. It's always this shit. It's the same with me being forced to buy a PlayStation. I didn't want a PlayStation. I was playing EVE. Why can I not play it on a PC? It makes no sense. They keep making these dumb mistakes.
It might make business sense, but not necessarily for the
players' sense. Yeah. But the thing is, I think we're getting too much into the generalizations. You know, I hear 2 generalizations that are not necessarily correct. One is they're not listening to their players, and then the other one is the players are shitting on everything they do. That is a broad generalization across the EVE players.
It's just the truth. Anything they announce, there's
that's
going
a generalization.
To be people,
that is by itself
anything
flawed.
they announce, and everything they have ever announced, there will be a vocal minority that will say that it's a bad idea, and that is,
and that's fine. That is perfectly
pick an example.
Fine.
I'll get you proof.
That is perfectly fine. If you are a minority and you complain about it, that is perfectly fine. You want that. You want to hear the other side. You want to hear the other people that tell you that it is a bad idea. But it's blankly saying that that all EVE players are going to shit on something.
I didn't say
it's
all
not
players,
necessarily
though, did I? So you're telling me I'm making a generalization. I'm not making. I'm saying there'll always be a vocal minority that says
you
that it's a bad
refrain,
idea.
which that's the thing, right? You revise what you said, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Inevitable. That's inevitable.
Perfectly fine.
Any change anyone makes, because the people who are happy about it are already getting what they want. They're not going to.
No, this is why not think of something like what they talked about with brand unification and account sharing thing, right? The fact that we make all of this Plex-based economy into one thing, so I can actually kickstart the CCP projects before I sign up. So I can put Plex on that account that's actually burned out of their economy. So it goes on their books, and I will be giving access to these things when alpha hits, when echoes come out, all this stuff. Make the players vote with their money. The people that like things are now silent. They wouldn't be if you put wallets onto it.
Okay. Should we move on to a different topic they talked about at FanFest?
Sure.
Or do we have more to talk about here?
But you get my point, right? All the people that were hyped about walking in stations, if suddenly they could have put some money in the game, right? Saying, oh, I would actually like to sign up and put Plex or pre-order. This is the whole business model of Star Citizen, selling pipe dreams and roadmaps and never delivering. At least CCP has consistently delivered what they promised to some extent.
Ooh, well, not
all right,
really.
All right, Caleb, I'll give you that only because I was in fact able to walk from the pod gantry to the captain.
Yeah, let's not talk about the rubber cell. It's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Just a couple announcements. I did ask people in chat here, since it's about 130, go ahead and X up if you like Blackout. Put a Y if you don't like it. Let's see what the composition of the listeners are. And we did talk about MER briefly earlier on, and we're going to cover that extensively this Sunday on Talking In Stations. So a lot of X, and so is a Z. Panda must be in between. There's a lot of Y's and a lot of X's. We can count them up, but I think it looks like the X's took it by a little bit. So it's interesting because it's a lot more mixed than even I thought, at least in our current audience, which is just a snap poll of a few people. I imagine if you were to extrapolate that out, there's a lot of people who really like what's going on in EVE right now. They are having a lot of fun. A lot of people have come back. Like I said, was it the CEO of Black Omega Corp, I think, came back, and you have at least saying that people are coming back, and even smaller groups are seeing people come back to play the game now that it's in blackout. Now they might be just trying it, but they're coming back to check it out.
But you can't make a business on that, right? Because you're ignoring the people that are leaving. The only thing that matters from a business and a playability perspective is what is the net number. And we're not seeing that. We're hearing a lot of people actually leaving. If we keep talking about the people coming back only, then if that's a net negative, CCP is fucked.
Do we have
you have a bunch of people saying a bunch of different things, and for a lot of different reasons, right? Like you've literally got people saying they love Blackout who have nothing to do with Blackout at all, right? They love it because somebody else out there is feeling either pain or salt or tears or whatever the hell it is. So they love that aspect of it, but they don't really have anything to do with it. And then you've got people who are from other areas of space who, maybe wormholers who are like, oh yeah, this is freaking great because we've been dealing with this for years, and it's good to see that you are now. You know what I mean? It's like, and then you've got people who legitimately like it because they are now engaged with it in a different way.
Let's bring out the elephant in the room, okay? Goonswarm has been winning the game, it feels like, or Horde has been winning the game or starting to win the game. And they've been people who don't belong to those groups. Are they the ones saying, oh, good, epoxy on your houses. Now CCP, the only thing that can defeat you, God, basically in this game, has created diseases that are hitting your houses. Thank God. Like, is that what's going on here?
I'd just like to raise one point before
we jump into Roman theology. Go ahead.
A pox on your house.
What did I say?
No, it's epoxy. It's glue.
I like glue. All right, a pox on your house.
I mean, is it really such a horrible thing if it is? Do we want to have the same situation we had in the Oriental server and the China server happen here?
But these changes are actually not going to do what CCP is hoping it will do. It will do the exact opposite. Pretty much all of the changes recently are going to have the exact opposite effect of what they are talking about and claiming. This is not going to make it easier to enter null. It's not going to make it easier for the little guy. It's not going to fix the wealth distribution. It's going to do exactly the opposite. Every single one of them. And we talked about this again and again these last few weeks.
And if you really want to get a good idea for how it's not, just look at the comparison between total NPC bounties by region on the May MER, because that's the one before we packed up and left Delve to go to war all June, and this month's MER.
What would we see if we saw that?
You'd see massive drops across the entire game, but Delve's only down by 0.3 trillion.
You saw how they took the entire market.
But explain
share,
to
right?
the viewers what your point is.
What my point is that, hey, we're just rolling along here and everybody else is crazy. That's not going to fix the problem. It's just going to make the organized groups more attractive to the people who suddenly can't make their living out there in a small group.
What's the problem that you're talking about?
Well, if you're talking about the problem being goons are winning Eve, the biggest, most organized group will benefit most disproportionately from people flocking to the larger organized group.
So what change does CCP need to make that disproportionately helps a smaller group establish themselves in nullsec? Is there a change like that?
Remove anomalies.
Like, just make it easier so people can have fun in these new groups.
Make it so they don't feel like they need to get into the bigger.
Yeah, that's not,
so Blackout
that's not really
doesn't
a
serve
mechanic,
that?
is it?
I don't understand.
Blackout doesn't do that, because the bigger group means you've got more people watching your back. It means there are more people paying attention to D-scan to cover for you. Anybody who lives in wormhole space knows how this works. When you've got 15 people in a fleet, that's 15 sets of eyes who can be checking D-scan. When you've only got one guy out there, you are not as safe as if you've got 6 or 7 or 15.
So again, what is a mechanic that CCP could introduce that would actually encourage and help smaller groups to
remove anomalies.
Making it easy to the little guy is not a mechanic. Like
boost moonfracking and boost the Roid respawn values and remove anomalies.
Honestly, if you want a mechanics change that will not disproportionately empower the big groups, because yes, making it easier for little guys isn't a mechanics change, then what you really need to do is you need to address the actual frickin' elephant in the room, that by their very nature and by the limited way you can get at them, super capitals are stagnation.
Yeah, I'm with iHub. Remove multi-boxing, and I say that unironically, but that's been.
It's gonna make it even harder for the little guy.
I don't think so.
You don't want to hurt CCP's income stream, right? And from value point of view, multi-boxing is just as valuable as many players. You want to make it valuable to be a player instead of a multi-boxer. That's the whole point.
I'd rather have players than multi-boxers.
As far as would removing multi-boxing make things disproportionately harder for the little guy? Let me ask you one question, Matterall. In a group of, say, 100 players versus Goon Swarm, who has more spare players to log in assignments?
But the bigger group also has more need for Sinos, so.
But one Sino is enough for the entire.
I'm not actually a game designer. I don't know. I'm just saying, is that what's going on here? Because I think like the conversation keeps beating around the bush because we try to keep it general, but there's a lot of fuel under these changes. A lot of people are upset about these changes. A lot of people are ecstatic, and the two groups are irritating each other almost on purpose.
The argument is that they've made it easier to burn other players' fields. It's just that goons will always have more defense, so it's only going to hurt the smaller guys. So this is a complete mistake. What you need to do is make the existing groups be requiring more space and to live in them. That means get rid of the goon hole.
That's a bad idea.
Spread out a bad idea.
Because if you make us spread out again,
we will just ruffle stomp every small group.
You go back to pre-Aegis. Aegis
yeah, but you fix that with moonfracking.
No, Caleb, chill a second. Aegis is what forced us toward population density over floodplains. Do you want to go back to the Imperium owning 10 regions?
And I agree, and that's why I say that
you need to boost.
You need to boost
because the entire rest of the game hit
not
us.
The entire rest of the game. That's such.
But if you boost the moonfracking option proportionally to removing or nerfing anomalies, that would be a saleable wealth, and you could still live in smaller space when you build it out.
The entire rest of the game did not attack the Imperium. Maybe a lot of the nullsec groups attacked Imperium, but even if you look at
Lowsec too,
right, Lowsec groups,
it was a lot of people.
There's a lot of other. Okay, so maybe maybe of the combatants in nullsec and lowsec, a lot of groups joined to fight in the World War B Casino War, but there was a lot of people that didn't have anything to do with that. They were playing this game. And that's the.
Those weren't okay. When I say the rest of the game, I'm talking about the relatively large, relatively organized PvP-centric group.
Okay, that's different.
I mean, I'm curious
because the guys who aren't doing PvP, they weren't part of a war scenario. They're not playing that game.
Well, okay, go ahead. Not the player war scenario. Sure. I'll take your point there.
I'm kind of curious how floodplains would be that bad, though, because you cannot concentrate a superpower with 1,000 supers or whatever ridiculous number you want to say.
To take space in null, then you need us to not have a reason to come drive our super fleet through gates and stomp on them anytime
they do. There is an opposing force that is forcing density, which is a haste sub. So if you make it so the Imperium can expand, if you don't change a haste force, that's gonna be another pressure to concentrate. So you cannot really overextend. That can also happen.
Right. Right. So everyone is saying like, what is up with the floodplains, right? If goons so wanted to, They are such an organized organization. They can call upon 4 full super fleets with their faxes, and they could literally go, right, you look after this bit, you look after this bit, you look after this bit. Same as what happened in Serenity, where they literally split PIBC into a Northern Force and a Southern Force under completely separate commanders, completely separate pings, completely separate everything.
And the
But
thing
they
to keep
could come back together. Everyone is looking for a golden bullet to fix all of these problems in EVE, and I think we are too far gone. The horse has bolted too long ago to be able to go, here is the magic bullet that will turn everything around and make EVE great again.
Yeah, fixing moonfracking. That's the whole point. Moonfracking is the mechanic that builds the fields that takes over from the forest. And they need to think of this in their design. When you can't allow the players in Null to have free infinite spawning forests so they can have deer forests as well as farms. They have to choose. And then if they choose, then the moonfracking can create exactly the asymmetric gameplay that we used to have. Right. So when you remove the wildlife, you benefit from having more resource production, but it's going to be more asymmetric and it's going to be assailable. This is the whole magic bullet, but they need to actually want to do it.
Okay, so I will disagree with that for 2 particular reasons. One, again, goons and tests and that sort of thing are so well entrenched and so well set up at the moment. They could literally go, okay, get rid of Venoms. We'll just turn on every single Athanor we've got. Boom, we're probably losing 10% of our effective income. The second
Well, no,
thing
because
about it is
we'd kick smaller groups out again, right? And we just have an extra region on the cycle each cycle we do.
this is what I'm saying is
By
like
kicking out smaller
goons.
groups, do you mean your renters in adjacent region?
I'm not in the position to say who it would be, but it would be someone.
Because they're all the big groups, all their adjacent regions, they're not small people, they're renters. Lots of renters.
Test could kick out Provi.
I'm saying it would be Iridia.
Yeah,
could be Iridia, could be Quirius, could be period basis. It's irrelevant anyway in the long scheme of things. The other thing about it is would you really now want to force every single Rorqual under an Athanor for extra defense when they're already fairly hard to kill?
That's circular argument. The point is that you want farms and fields to matter. That means you need to balance wild versus civilized. And they don't do that right now. The benefit from having a crop rotation model instead with almost the same resources is that then you have assailable wealth. You have a moving thing. You have something you can disrupt. I don't know if you want to bring in hacking or ninja mining or whatever, but the point is that's assailable. I can't stop someone's anomaly being infinitely recycled.
And then, but all that does is you come back to the wonderful Citadel and time zone mechanics. Trying to attack ADM6 Citadels is just no bueno.
But that's something you can balance.
So hard.
That's something you can fix.
Hang on, we've been asking CCP to fix that for 3+ years now.
Basically, since they were. Oh no, not since they were released. Before they were released, because we even told them it was bad before it was released.
But fracking, moon fracking systems is not something you live in. It's something you feed from. So arguing that needs to be easier to disrupt and destroy is completely valid, and most of EVE would agree with that.
Most of EVE has agreed with less time
changes.
And this is
to do, so it doesn't matter.
And this is the thing, is like you're saying, like, oh, moon fracking is going to be this golden bullet, and I'm saying, no, it's not, because at the moment, right, we've had conversations about this within tests, and it's literally a case of, okay, you look at all the structures in Detroit or Immensia or, Scalding Pass, and it's literally a case of, if it's smaller than a Satio or a T2 Tatara, just don't even consider it. It is not worth the ping because they are so cheap. They are so easy to put down. It's like you're burning 200 people for 45 minutes to bash a structure 3 times in a row for it to be instantly replaced with no ill impact to the game.
But again, you're arguing cyclically, right? You're pretty much arguing from existing problems. But I'm saying that if you start changing these things one step at a time, you will get a fix. If you make it easier to actually take down things, infrastructure that's only a farm, right? if you do that, and you also have things like no asset safety, so it's pretty much becomes a loot pinata for the content that's been mined because of the logistic strain, and you nerf these extreme compression schemes that CCP has added as quality of life. If you do all of these things one step at a time, you will have exactly the magic bullet that you need, and you can't argue with using existing problems because that's what's broken.
Caleb, there's at least one, without actually getting into the meat of what you're saying, there's at least one significant problem with that. That's all plans.
No, but the point is the vision. The point is that they need to understand the difference between wild and civilized. It's the same thing with this compromise that just got killed, where all of EVE objects to bringing back local and the perfect intel using observatory arrays. That was the compromise we agreed upon back with structures. Now it's suddenly being killed by this wormhole lobby that is just completely out of whack.
Wait, wormholes actually have say?
Yeah, I don't quite believe that.
Turns out Reddit reads enough that they get listened to.
Wormholes have a big enough voice. Does anyone remember Does anyone remember
Hilmar
when they hit the bubbles?
That is highly.
Everyone agreed with them on the hick bubble. It's not like everyone else was saying remove them, delete them.
Let's go back to Farmville Field, because that's a really difficult point to argue that it is wormholers who are pushing this. That's just
wormholers aren't pushing that.
No, let's move on out of that one. So
it's got nothing to do with what I just said. I was talking about removing of local.
Exactly.
The fact that the structures that were supposed to be the compromise for that was that then you could bring it back with an array. That's what we agreed upon when we started talking about structures in the focus groups, right? That was the goal, that was the vision and the roadmap. Now that's been slated, and now you can't. Well, everyone is opposed to bringing it back. Well, that was the agreement. Why are we suddenly rolling that back?
No, I disagree. Not everyone is against bringing it back. There's a lot of people that are for bringing it back. Like everyone is putting on brave faces from what I'm seeing. Like there's a lot of the higher ups going, "Oh yeah, blackout's fine. You know, it's not really affecting us." Da 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 da. And I'm looking at the MERs and I'm
It is
going,
affecting them, right?
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of places here that have suddenly lost 50% of their value in less than 3 months, and there's only been 2 big changes.
Only 2 major, yeah. Well, the second one hasn't even hit yet.
Nullsec players don't need to make their money in Nullsec. Like, if you just keep nerfing Nullsec is making, people just
it's already been. No, it's not even wormholes. It's already been discussed. Like I'm hearing people going, you know, if this blackout continues, you know, hello C5 dread farming, hello moving my Logiults up to incursion running, hello running triple hawks in T5. You know, everyone's just basically saying, I'm coming out of null into high sec to do incursions, or I'm going to run my Abyssal T5s in high sec.
Is this really problematic?
Yeah, incursions have been.
It's not problematic, and I know they've been nerfed, but when you're looking at a case of, I can run these 3 T2 Hawks, make more ISK than what I can do VNI spinning on these 3 tunes. Okay, under less risk.
That is way
under less risk.
Yeah, but
I agree.
But the AFK gameplay will, and this is, I think, part of what CCP wants. If you're gonna be in nullsec with the extremely high and difficult gameplay, they're gonna make it extremely high and difficult for you. It's not gonna be easy. And if you want to, you can relax. And so that AFK gameplay where you sit back and make some money while you're doing multiple things like watching a movie or whatever starts to move down towards, say, low sec and high sec and slower money generation. No, I'm saying
that right now, crowd control production are not controlling crowds. They're pretty much doing DDoS on the player base.
And just to cut in quick, Matt, it's AFK play isn't even moving to high sec because they've now thrown the invasion rats around, right? With the recon dam of it.
Yeah.
They just don't want invasions. They just don't want AFK gameplay at all.
I get. Hey, if you don't want AFK gameplay, then don't
make engaging gameplay
so AFKable.
Yeah,
thank you, Doug. And don't make
it's easier to punish people than to create rewarding mechanics. That's just the sad truth of it.
Hold on a second. The something I want to go back to that Seraph said I thought was interesting was that I think everybody is hurting in nullsec. A lot. I keep hearing from different groups. Lux, you yourself were Tell us about your experience with people after Blackout hit.
I mean, the corp I was in before basically called it quits, the leaders and a few other players as well, and then they rolled into another corp. So
wait, what was this corp?
It's a corp in Lawn that I was part of.
Okay.
And to be clear, that's not the only one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that that's not the exception to the rule. That's quite a common theme I'm hearing from a lot of people. Like there's a lot of talk about people folding in on top of each other to make things easier for everyone, and it's like so I'll look at Blackout from both an FC perspective and from a perspective of just being a line member, because I do my mining, I do my ratting.
Hold your thought 1 second.
Go on.
I just want to follow this. So if people have left and it's the rule that they're merging to kind of stay alive, let's say, where are those people that have left going? Are they going to HiSec or are they leaving the game?
Consolidating.
They left the game, but the ones that stayed are really enjoying it. So it's sort of
because just to echo what Lux has said, I was with A's in his corp. We've just taken the decision that that's going to fold into Karma Fleet and Thunderwater and others. 2/3 of the corp are leaving the game.
Are they leaving the game or are they going to do something else?
Leaving the game. Maybe to come back if CCP change their direction.
Well, they're not going to change
Why
direction.
do you think they want to leave the game?
Why do they want to leave the game? Because people have lost faith in CCP. Because these changes are just crap. There is no direction. There is no goal.
All these guys told you that?
We had a meeting and that was the echoed response.
Okay. I would sit there and discount the saying have lost faith in CCP. I think they don't like the changes, so therefore that plays into their supposed lost faith in CCP.
Some didn't like the changes. Some were more. I don't know how to nuance it, but there was more nuance to their argument where it was, we don't see them as having a plan, which has basically been confirmed today.
Well, hold on. And there is a long-term element of that in there, and it can go back to the whole idea of roadmaps and what it is CCP says and what it is you should listen to and whatnot, about whether or not they have been afforded the faith that they deserve in kind of whether or not something like talking less and acting more, thinking less and acting more, or just some dude who throws up the word chaos should matter. Like, do they have a track record of you should believe in that kind of lame talk? Probably not. But I would say that if somebody's quitting right now, it's not because all of a sudden today, because of these changes, they have lost faith. It is a longer term sort of expectations management and disappointment kind of thing over a longer time.
And we should also say that people lost faith before these changes even hit. Before drifters ever attacked, people had lost faith and were leaving the game. And I point to Skill U as a group basically saying we don't like the way this game is going. So this happens. It's happening a lot now, or we're hearing a lot about it in certain sectors of EVE. And I namely say, because we have a lot of Imperium people here at TIS, we've been hearing it from Imperium people. I've been hearing it very little in NC, but I don't really hear much there. Horde, I'm sure they're suffering too, but I don't know to what extent. There are probably other groups that are having the same effect, but I definitely hear it from the Imperium because a lot of Imperium people are here, and that's what I'm exposed to.
I'm going to say there's also the extension that certain groups are larger, so you may just hear it more from them because of the sheer amount of people.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at raw numbers, Legacy and Goons are pretty even. They wouldn't say Legacy and Goon members here is anywhere close to even.
Yeah. Oh, Legacy. I cut off Seraph Patakane. He was saying from his perspective what it was like. He's from Test, I believe.
Yes, I am from Test. So I've got a pretty privileged experience that I can see this both from an FC's perspective, and I hear about different things from all the other FCs within Test, and I also see it from a line member's perspective because I go out and mine, I go out and rat, I've got rorks, I've got supers, I do the needful, shall we say, to get the S to go PvP when I need to, and it's been a double-edged sword. for the PvPers and the PvP aspect of the game, this blackout has been an absolute boon to, targets of opportunity. I'm looking at Predator's group within Test and all the activity they're getting out of it. It's like it's non-stop with them. They're pinging. We've got targets. We've got this. We've got that. Give me bombers. Give me Loki's. Give me everything. Every couple of minutes there's something going on with them. But then from the line member perspective, and I'm looking through Corp because I've got some access to Corp documentation. I'm seeing some responses from Corp members as well. And from my line members' perspective, people that rap, people that mine, people that aren't 24/7 dedicated to the game are looking at this blackout and going, I tell you what, I'll wait until it changes. There's a lot of people that have docked up the Titans, they've docked up the Supers, and they're literally going, I'm going to wait until something changes before I even think about undocking these things.
Yes.
I've got other people saying, I've stopped my Rorquals, I've stopped my Exhumas, I've unsubbed them, my plans to have 4 or 5 Faxalts and Capitals and this, that, and the other. Yep, binned all that off, and I've got 1 tomb now. So I can see why PvPers especially are like saying this is the best thing since sliced bread, because it is. It's a fantastic change to the game. But they've also got to balance it out, because all these PvP guys are going, yes, we've got these targets of opportunity. They're going to dwindle if you don't give them the reason to go out. And
we should say they're killing each other too. They're not just killing
definitely
miners.
Definitely
they're
killing
mostly
each other.
Right.
Yes,
okay, I
no.
overstepped. I overstepped saying mostly. I don't know if that's true, but
yeah,
we could look at
I can confirm basically the same fundamental story over in Goons. I mean, Zungan's out there freaking dropping things every goddamn day. I mean, it just pings left and right. That doesn't mean that the regular line guys who aren't doing the blops work all the time are enjoying anything.
Plus, blopsing gets it's like high-sec ganking, right? And I speak from experience on both.
It basically is, yeah. In high
I
sec,
can agree with
in
that.
high sec, it's ganking and it's bad. In null sec, it's good.
I don't think they're completely equivocal. Like blopsing, there's a lot more in terms of you can be caught out, you can be more easily countered. You can't.
You can be baited,
Cyno
yes.
help.
But what we're saying is for the 8 times out of 10, you're dropping onto these VNIs, these Orcas, these carriers, and just obliterating them in 30 seconds before they can even do anything.
The fundamental model of, hey, we're going to come up here completely by surprise and obliterate you before you can do anything, and then run away. Ha ha ha. We say that's terrible in one part of the game, but it's great in another.
The thing is, in boxing, the enemy has the opportunity to something. In high sec, even if you waited, and I mean, loads of times before getting ganked, you be bumped to like 30 minutes or so. You're not getting help.
What
that's a new change, by the way.
The enemy have in blopsing under the.
By the way, that's a new change. It looks like they're going to fix bumping. You'll be bumped for 3 minutes before your warp drive kicks in.
It's definitely not uncommon before this change. Well, it hasn't happened yet, but to be bumped for very long amounts of time.
Sure.
It's not like in blopsing, you don't hang around with your blops there and all the fleet jet just waits
right.
like 15
Okay. You're right. You're right. Let's get off that example. But I want to I see a lot of energy surging through talking in stations, and you can see a lot of stuff going through Reddit. I don't actually read it very much. You can certainly see it in Imperium News, a couple articles or 3 articles just about how the new direction or lack of direction is not washing well with certain players, especially from the Imperium. Is that my perception, or is that a reality, you guys?
I think there's a lot of fear about it's not the direction that CCP are doing. It's what's coming across as being very like baseball bat nerfs to the face. It's very hit and miss in terms of what they're going to do next, So this Cyno change was completely out of left field. No one even was thinking about it or expecting it. There was talk about, changes to timers, minor changes to Cynos to make them, a little bit more counterable or a little less effective. But this was literally whoa, hang on a second. We're completely going out of left field here, and here's these changes.
I was hearing talk about changes like that 2 years ago when I lived in Null. So it's not that new. It's just new from CCP.
People have been doing
Isn't that the
sign changes
point of this whole thing, is to not let you know that a change is going to happen, to spring it on you, and it's a big change?
Oh
Well,
yeah,
we
I,
didn't
I
happen with
definitely.
Sinos.
Sinos Rise decided to let it out early because it gave people time to prepare. Because
To train, yeah.
I can guarantee you, even in a group the size of Test, how many Force Recons are you going to be able to scrounge up on day one of the Sino changes?
Well,
Especially
with
if they
injectors, quite
didn't.
a few.
Okay, and if they didn't announce it until the day they released it.
I got about 20 alts that can do it.
Okay, so you're definitely the exception to the rule.
I'm training.
You have 20
and I
alts
have
that can
two.
do that.
Yeah, that's kind of what
Okay,
happened
this
when
is-
you've been part of Recon for like 8.
Okay, yeah, that you have a special cause to do that. But this is why I say there are not 10,000 people in the Imperium. There's more like 4 or 5. But that's just
Well,
my
there's at
perception.
least 6,500 in goons people.
People like
Yeah, I just checked
to qualify
like,
that number. Like how is that?
A person. There's 6,500 people in Goon Swarm the Alliance.
Where does that come from?
Internal stats.
It'd be the forums, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but how active are those people to qualify for that list? Is that
they are in the Alliance?
That's how many are registered in the Alliance. Okay. I don't think that's
And
how
we've been
that's the
doing
maximum.
purges.
What's that?
And we've been doing purges.
Okay, so with purging 6,500.
I'd say they're probably looking at about 5,500, active weekly players within Goonswarm. I'd say we're probably looking at about 3,000 within Test, maybe at tops.
To be clear as well, just to ask this one to Arendis and Sugar, that's just Goonswarm, right? That's not including Bastion, Lorne, or TNT.
Goonswarm.
Yeah.
That implies
You want Bastion numbers? You probably got to ask
active players in them, which is
Carneros, give us your Bastion numbers.
Basically 10% of Goonswarm. So whatever you hear for a Goonswarm number, Bastion is usually take off 10 on the end and about the same for me.
About 600?
If he said 6,000, which I thought I heard 5,000, but if he said 6,000, we'd be about 600.
6,500, which would make you 650.
Right, that's about right. Now, those 650 don't all play at exactly the same time zones and things, but yes.
Okay, that's good to get a more comprehensive idea, because we hear 40,000 strong and all these numbers, and this goes for all alliances. And usually, we all know that not to say
when you go by the dotland numbers, it's always going to be.
It's much more impressive. Yeah.
I mean, especially for goons, because we have the alt corps in our alliance, and like a lot of other alliances spread out their alt. For example, I don't think you can do an industry corp in Pandemic Legion or like with just your alt.
If memory serves me right, all of Pandemic Legion's industrial alts have to go to bots. Or one of the renter
yeah,
groups. I know that.
NCPL out pushed all those guys out to I don't know if it's bot, but it's out of NCPL.
Triumvirate did a very similar thing as well back in the day.
Well, the roots of Triumvirate are roots of NC too. The parts of Band of Brothers, Bob, that joined NC joined later. The original NC, the nucleus of it that started it, and I don't know if it's the same now, was basically like Triumvirate and Atlas. In fact, Bob, in its second form, was after it was disbanded, and then it kind of came back together as Kenzuko, but that quickly changed to IT Alliance, which was, I think, the dumbest name in EVE Online's history. As IT Alliance, they fought NC Dot, I think, a couple, 3 or 4 times, and I mean, devastating results, huge amounts of dreads, and even I think a couple Titans dropped. And this is at a time when Titans were rare. So, yeah, anyway, you were saying.
I'm just thinking that, so I'm going to throw a thought out there, okay? So, CCP is trying to sow chaos into the game with all these changes, moving of local, these Sino changes, yeah? If these signer changes don't do what CCP want to do in terms of metrics or the figures or whatever they want, what's next? What are they going to do next? Like this is the fear that I've got, is they're going to come out with something even crazier, and they're going to go, this is going to be the next big thing, and it's going to be like, what?
Well, it's going to be asset safety, like
yeah,
already
I think asset safety. Yeah.
I mean,
I think
I'd
that's
just
already
like to
confirmed at
point
this
out
point.
we pretty much agreed earlier that it's not one magic bullet to fix it, and yet here we are at the same point in time decrying CCP for trying multiple things. I mean, yeah, they might be trying the wrong things, but they are trying multiple avenues of attack to try and get the results,
Sure, but
even if they're not accurate.
biggest problem with the way CCP does stuff, though, and this
It's
goes
the way
back
they
for
do it.
years. Well, hang on, and this goes back for years, and it's still visible now, is that they change 3 or 4 things at once and then go, okay, so we don't know what actually produced what result.
All right, we got some
Very much.
stream subs. That's awesome. Thanks, guys.
But it's also the fact that they seem to not, or at least for the last 8 years, pretty much when Hilmar has been away doing other stuff, and all the original team has been fired or left the game voluntarily. The whole vision has gone to this playability, and it's just a game and quality of life. And it's like, you've destroyed the premise. This is supposed to be a sandbox. It's supposed to be rough. It's supposed to be a simulation. So when you start removing all of these things that were put in to make the simulation work, of course it's going to break. That's expected. It's just that it was so gradual that no one realized what was going on.
I don't really agree. I don't think they, like, sometimes they intervene too quickly into the sandbox. Like, the opposite. They don't let it play out as it should.
When?
I disagree. I think it's a case of, it seems like CCP is scared to make changes, and when they do make changes, they're too scared to admit when they're wrong.
Like
because
sorry, let me cut you off, Sarah, because there's a couple things that I just feel like CCP is doing one thing and then it's getting interpreted as almost the exact opposite. One of the things that we've been hearing is that CCP just wants to make money. That's why they're disrupting so much, which is, as Rise said, absurd. Like, he doesn't really understand how you can, like, there's a lot of ways they can make money and they know how, but they're doing the exact opposite and trying to invest in a long-term future. And here,
that's because the signer changes smell a little bit of saying similar bait and switch
that's just because we're all conspiracy minded.
No, because it's the way it's done. It's like, take the most rare ship that anyone has actually trained into.
Yeah, and you have plenty of time to train into it. So
but you don't. You
Ryan
only
said
have
you
half
did.
the time. But that's a lie.
We ran if the only thing, the best case scenario, the only thing you needed to get into a force recon was to train racial cruisers 4, that's still 24 days. That's best case. If you need to get your Ibis Sino for your jump freighter into a Covops, which is slightly faster than the Prospect because you don't need to train industry, that's 60 days.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
and
also,
horrendous.
Araya-san says that we did have a lot of SP banking going on in the last few things with their incentives to go and kill things and get SP, so you can bank it. You can cut the time it takes to train into stuff by going on doing stuff.
You're going to need to bank it. If you didn't and you used it, well. You can't they banked it.
The point is, there's opportunity.
Spent at.
First of all, not everybody should be able to have what they had before necessarily. Like, that does feel unfair, but you're not supposed to they're not supposed to always reimburse things you lose. And they're not supposed to give you things that you had before to keep you happy, but they have given you the ability to generate SP in the game and also given you time to train up these things. And I think both those things combined should get most people past that hump of being trapped, which is what they wanted to avoid, I believe.
This is one of those points where you should have reduced. You should have done an offer on the next store where you can buy very cheap extractors. then at least you would have the option.
Well, and the farmers
to
would
then
farm the heck out of it, and
Yeah, that would just be broken.
Right. Anyway,
Yeah,
the point
no,
is,
that
Seraph,
wouldn't work.
I cut Seraph off because he was saying something that seemed to me to be the exact opposite of what they want to do. And Seraph, if you remember what you were saying, if you could continue. Probably not, right?
No.
If anyone wants to see a fully monetized game, just go play Black Desert Online for a couple hours. I mean, it looks nothing like Eve, and for very good reason.
Well, they now own Eve, so I think there's always this alert sensation that hopefully it doesn't turn into that, because a lot of people play Eve.
Don't get me wrong. I actually agree that there should always be a little bit of an incentive from CCP to actually try to also make some money when they change things in the game. It's just that they should really focus on net gains of players that want to pay, instead of this whole let's swap things around a bit and then just see if we can cannibalize it after the fact.
The question is, do older players, and this might be true, pay more into a game that they're already paid into, or do new players create more potential for revenue? Who knows? Dirk McGurk asks
50-50, I'd say.
Maybe, we don't know. Dirk McGurk says, what exactly is the Sino Freighter? And I want to know the same thing. What is the Sino Freighter thing they announced today?
On Sissy, there's been added a new freighter, which specifically in the description describes that there's no freighter, a new Sino, which the description says can only be used for jump freighters. And there aren't really any on Sissy yet. We don't know fitting requirements and things like that. But while CSM Exuki says, as you can see in chat, that it has no ship restriction.
So it's the old Sino.
So this hasn't.
So, just to be clear, this is now another bait and switch where everyone's gone and got one of the Covops ships to fit a Covops Sino to use with the jump freighter, like CCP said you need. And now they have this.
CCP did not announce. CCP did not announce. Okay. Changes that were coming in September. They have a proposal out there that is open for response, and what they have not announced this is coming.
I think calling this a bait and switch is premature, since this was blatantly done as much like the whole issue of the Sino Vigil. This was blatantly done as okay, we clearly didn't think through how you guys were going to feel about this. Let's see if we can accommodate you.
Yeah, this is a complete solution and a fix. It's got nothing to do with a bait and switch.
If you were buying skill injectors to inject into your Covops,
what happened was they listened to the feedback the players gave them.
Okay, go ahead, Exuki, CSM member.
I believe one of the primary drivers behind the freighter Sino was also that one of the number one feedback that people started asking about was we light Sinos as a form of vigil, and we have memorials with them, and we have events for a variety of reasons where we get a whole bunch of people together and they light a Sino. And so they said restricting those Sinos to ships that newer players or all of my characters aren't going to be able to fly would have a negative impact on some of those things. There's no shortage of different reasons that corporations have events out there where they get a whole bunch of people and light Sinos and for this or that. So if you look at the attributes and you compare it to some of the other Sinos, you'll just note that when they came out, you saw adjustments to some of the ships, and you saw tweaks. This ship can now fit Sinos, this ship can't. There's flags. The freighter Sino doesn't have any of those yet, or probably won't. So I'm pretty confident that this is their attempts to just kill two birds, one stone. One, jump freighters pilots complained immensely about the added expense of moving their logistic chains. And two, a Sino that I can light with my IBIS for the purpose of remembering insert name here or whatever we're lighting Sinos for.
Out of curiosity, and obviously there's going to be some element of either you don't know or you can't tell us if there is any information about this one, but do you know if the freight Sino will be able to be lit in high? Because high sec memorials, that'd kind of be nice.
Yeah,
the high sec people die too.
That would literally be like no more JF ganking ever.
Yeah, no. That would just make jump freighter services immune to anything.
Exploitation.
like as a Mainlove guy that actually hunts jump raiders, and as someone that actually did jump raiders for a year, it's way too easy already. There's no need for Isaac sign.
I'd also like to point out that CCP Rise did actually mention in his interview about the potential of these Sino, Sino industrials. He mentioned it, so we can't be too surprised. Maybe they were kind of rushed out the door because of the outrage, but the idea was already in CCP's head.
Look, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to the Phoebe jump drive changes. Okay, do you remember the first iteration of that? Okay, and
the unlimited jump fatigue,
and the 800,000 lines of jump freighter stuff and whatnot, and then things changed. They come out with these things, and their first iteration of a proposal is not usually what hits the field exactly.
To put some light on that, what Dirk is talking about is that when they first announced jump changes, they were going to affect everything, including jump freighters, which would have made them jump very, very small distances, and it would have made logistics a nightmare, and there was a huge outcry.
Workwolves, industrials, in jump bridges and things like.
I thought. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the theory of jump changes were the jump freighters would keep their range, but they wouldn't get the jump fatigue reduction. So they would be, they wouldn't be able to jump every 5 minutes. They would be under the same penalties.
That was the adjustment. That was the adjustment that was made to satisfy the complaints. Originally, they were only going to go 5 light years.
Wait, when did they give them back the reduction?
Before the actual change came out, they made an adjustment. They announced that this is what they were going to do. They announced this is what we're going to do. All ships jump 5 light years, all of them. And then they said, okay, jump freighters can jump 10, which was actually more than they had originally.
No, it was a little bit less, I think.
I think it was 9.
It was 12. I thought it was 12 for jump freighters.
Yeah.
But I think the way they adjusted the skills, you could jump. I thought a little further.
They made adjustments to range. They made adjustments to fatigue. Like they made adjustments.
Right,
so
right.
Look, if what you hear from CCP Rise, and then the Sino kind of proposal, dev blog thing right off the bat is what you react to, just know that we've got the CSM summit that is coming up in a few weeks, and they're talking about this happening sometime in September. So chances are the feedback, the CSM summit, like all of these things are going to come into play that can potentially modify these things. If you want to jump ahead and say, well, I'm going to go off of the worst case scenario, that's something you can do. Just know that could potentially be something that doesn't exactly play out the way that they initially said.
I mean, I'm just going to go back to what Zafrid has said. The whole argument of you have time threw itself out the window the minute CCP started messing with stuff closer to the deadline. Right? Because at that point, you don't have time because they may just change it on the fly again.
Well, that's why it's nice to know that they have a plan.
Yes.
But what? Here's the thing. I understand needing to know the plan. My favorite parts of EVE Online, watching FanFest, watching Alliance Tournament.
Plan. I just need to know they have one.
Well, okay, so they need to give you confidence they know what they're doing, but they've been at this for 17 years, and you don't have confidence they know what they're doing?
You can sort of argue that with some of the moves they've made, like Entosis, Fuzzy Claws, Citadels.
I disagree because they stated their goals. They said this is how we're going to meet them, and I think in large part, if you look at what their goals were and what they accomplished, it actually worked. Now, how players mutated it in ways that they hadn't, or stacked it, or figured out how to work the system, that's something that's very hard to account for when you have thousands of very smart players. I think EVE players are some of the smartest gamers out there working on this problem and helping each other work on the problem. That's hard to
when those players are warning them this is going to happen.
Yeah, we told them what would happen.
You didn't warn them all the time about all the things, and everything that you said worked out all the time.
Fuzzy Claws was like every member of the CSM went, if this goes live as it did,
yeah,
this is going to be the meta, and nothing will counter it. What happened for 2 years?
Cancel clause.
And it may.
I mean, if you want a more recent example,
That's one thing, by the way.
When they disabled warp stabs on faction warfare complex gates, the response was, well, people are just going to use ventures to do these things. And Fozzie's response was, I really don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, maybe we'll revisit it. And it took them like a year and a half before they actually stopped it. Because, hey, guess what? Exactly what the players told them would happen, happened.
Well, how do you know it actually happened in the amount that was detrimental to the game? I figure they're looking at statistics saying this is within our margin of, okay, let's let this go on for a while. Like, I don't think they make a change. You guys warn them about a change.
Let me
then everything happens the way that you guys think it's going to happen. And they say, oh, wow, we didn't even think of that.
Have you been to the Faction Warfare Discord?
My point is this. They are not. These guys are the guys that think about the game all the time. We play the game all the time collectively. Sure, they think about the game all the time. They're looking at what we're saying. They're looking at what we're writing. They're looking at what we're doing, and they have numbers in addition to that.
How many of them are there?
Yeah, there's like a couple compared to like thousands of people giving feedback.
We're going.
So,
how many
just
devs?
by forcing it.
The problem is,
we're going to think of things they don't, and when we do. They should listen.
The problem is that you being able to cite 2 or 3 examples about how the community is right is ignoring all of the options in which the sky was falling and nothing happened.
Okay, I'll cite another 2. Rock course, skill injectors.
Again, okay, so the fact that roll calls became super popular is a feature, not a bug. First of all,
yeah.
Second of all,
they called that shot.
Yeah, they wanted that to happen.
Hold up, though. The fact that rorquals became super popular isn't the issue. The fact that rorquals were ridiculously overpowered, they knew it, they were told this repeatedly, and their response was, well, that's okay, we can dial it back. That's the issue.
And they did. They nerfed it like 4 times.
That's the strategy. Like that was the strategy. The problem is that if the rorqual was not overpowered when it got rebalanced, then it would not have been adopted.
And people would have said, like, you just nerfed my rorqual by making it not compress ore, and you took away boosting and made it like active grid boosting. So now what do I have a rorqual for? You guys don't know what you're doing. I'm leaving the game.
They were killing an entire play style, and they knew it. And the rorqual pilots that had rorquals beforehand were not the same as the people who wanted it after. That is a huge change, and it required a giant bait on the end of the hook in order to get people to do it.
If they had initially taken rorquals to where they are now, or even a little worse, uptake would have been slower, but they would have got.
I mean, that's really, really easy to say in the sidelines after the fact.
Yeah, hindsight's 20/20 always.
That's really, really easy to say. As somebody who's mining AltCorp was talking about this at the time.
Sure, we had a show on it. We had 5 industrialists from all over the game talking about how the rorqual was mining at the rate of 5 hulks, which was amazing. It had the tank of a fax, which was amazing. And then there was this panic thing, which was amazing. Like, we all knew that this was going to happen, but we also knew that it was expected. Because Fozzie said, we're going to give rorquals their time in the sun, and that's what they did.
I don't think CCP expected it to get to the state that it did get, though, with some of the extremists taking it up to 40+ subs in a fleet. Like that 40 rorquals,
but
one human sitting behind.
To go to the extremes.
Oh, definitely.
Again and again and again.
But you have forerunners. You have forerunners that do it first, and then they say, "Hey guys, this is how I did it," and now you can now make this an assembly line of people doing it, and that's when the problem strikes. Hold on, I'm going to bring in Exuki, who I want to talk about this whole plan thing. Are you there, Exuki?
Yep, still here. So, I mean, I just dumped my 2 cents in public, but I just wanted to kind of state that a whole bunch of people were throwing or complaining, and like what we have now is very different than what we used to have in years past. I don't think that it's completely fair to jump in and just go, okay, it's that CCP doesn't have a plan, because if you're listening, CCP does have a plan. Whether or not you like the plan is a different story, but they have a plan and there is a vision of where we're going. But what you're getting is, instead of we're going to roll this out and we're going to roll this out and then this is coming later in the fall, we have just this vague direction. And I think some of the reason that we have that, one, is they're trying to posture themselves to be able to respond quicker. So, I mean, some of you were just talking about how from them saying, that's a good idea, to them actually doing it can be well over a year. They tie their hands a bit when they actually give a big, here's what we're doing, this release, this release, this release. So, we used to have Fanfest where they'd get up and talk about all the things we're getting over the next year. And now we're only getting things that they're telling us things that are coming out basically in the very near future. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I mean, it's new, time will tell, but I think that you've got to look a bit deeper to really see what they're trying to do, and I think I can tell you with very with decent amount of certainty that we're not just, I say they aren't just throwing things and going, okay, that worked or maybe didn't work, let's go try something else. Like, there is thought going into some of this. There is lots of people are watching to see how it works. What's going to happen next is just something that we're going to have to keep seeing unrolling. But I think that being super pessimistic to say that there's no plan, everything's on fire, and we're just continuing to throw fuel onto it, it's a very negative way of looking at it. That could be the end result, but I think that there's, Eve has gotten itself to the point, I think, that large, heavy-handed, tough love is kind of the only solution, because we also can't make tiny tweaks and then say, let's give it 6 months to see if that works, because Eve has found itself in some of the situations it is now because that used to be the way that balance was attempted and it didn't work. So,
right.
2 cents on plans.
So, what I'd like to see from CCP is this is a personal pet peeve of mine is iteration on things. Like, it gets very stale when the meta gets shifted into one situation and then it sits there for multiple years. Currently, we're going through the Hacks Online meta. Before that, it was Ferox's Online, and before that, we were looking at probably battleships to a point online. What I'd like to see is the iteration on a little bit of balance, like every couple of months, as they look at a ship class or a ship type, like they did with the T3C changes, and they just rebalance them a little bit. It doesn't need to be nerf bats, it doesn't need to be massive boosts, it's just little tweaks, little quality of life tweaks they do to other ships, but it happens regularly, not just here's our V&I changes and we'll see you in 5 years for the next round.
See, rather than changing the ships, a better way to do it, which is, I think, their ambition, is to be able to change the actual environments that you use those ships in. So the ships remain tools that are useful in different environments, but the environment isn't static anymore. And because the environment isn't static anymore, you won't have that sort of staleness in the game from one solution that's the best solution.
I agree with that, but what I'd say is like Exuki is probably a good person to speak about this, and how I know the wormhole meta has basically become Leshak's Online. Currently null is Unions Online. Why can't it be a situation where, okay, if it's going to be Hacks Online, okay, why can't we bring sacrileges and zealots into, the hacks, make them viable, rather than it just being one ship that's only ever the flavor of the month?
So the problem actually is that you are looking at only one aspect of the game, and you're saying, okay, well, what is the best at the thing that's going on? And there's always going to be an apex. But when you look at it in the more broader sense, that actually starts to disappear. So this idea that it's like, oh, it's Hacks Online or it's this online, like that actually becomes fairly disingenuous, because as you just said, Wormholes, it's Leshak's Online. So obviously it's not, Eve Online as a general is not Hacks Online if if wormholes are Leshak's online.
But he never said that applies to the entire game. He specifically said that's the meta in this part of the game.
I also think we can do better than one meta per region of space. That's like
Yes.
four
This
ships
this
per
and this
relevant
is
That's
what I'm
literally
saying
the
is
point.
yeah, it's like we had T3Cs online were the latest and greatest thing when PL and NC were dominating half of New Eden. T3C rebalance came along, and you now never see a Proteus or a Legion in any sort of null fleet. You see them as solo hunters, you see them as day trippers, and you see them as exploit ships. Anywhere near a mainline fleet, you have no hope in hell.
No, I use a Legion for my Logi anchor.
So why don't we see a normal meta flow where the meta shifts because players are shifting between counters? As one thing rises, then the counter of that thing becomes the new predator because people are flying that so much.
Have screwed the balance so far that there is no counter. The
Did you
counter
guys-
is to
I
use the same
mean-
fleet.
Did you guys note that they mentioned the idea that the players could actually innovate when it came to technology in the game?
Yeah, that would
Yes, but that's not in
be
place
very
yet.
interesting, but they have to completely and totally develop new code. Because
Well,
the
it
game
could
has
be.
to be able to figure out how you can potentially innovate.
Well, Ash has talked about this with us before, about the potential for doing it around mutaplasmids and BPCs, or even hulls. I mean, that would stop staleness, wouldn't it?
I mean,
No,
that's
because it's too hard for a fleet. You can't guarantee yourself a good supply of consistent hulls.
not just that. It's also not the players innovating. That's just CCP innovating and the players using it still.
The problem with something like that is if it remains unpredictable, like the mutaplasmids, then you can't get enough adoption because FCs and other groups need consistency so that they know what their fleets can do, so that they know what their tools can do. And if it is consistent, congratulations, everyone will just min-max it out, figure out what the best option is, and go with it.
And now I want you to go listen back to what you just said and understand that that is the reason why CCP is the way that it is. And it's not like they're incompetent or not doing it right. Like that's just people want consistency. And therefore you end up with these metas that stay for a while because guess what? That's what consistency looks like.
Yeah, all the big metas that dominate, they're always sort of consistent ones. Obviously, you can find things that are better at Moonins at very specific things or in very specific circumstances, but people want metas that can always perform.
What about the Stuka fleets? I've heard really good things about them.
Bombers are doing. I won't deny bombers are doing
Stuka
well as well.
Stuka fleets are great for offensive operations. So you're going to kill Rorquals, you're going to kill Capitals. For any other situation,
they're also
why would you?
So now it's not only is it one aspect of space.
They're also not a really great counter for Munins because the Munins are too damn fast.
Yeah, Munins will just shred a Stuka fleet. It's been one of the big counters to and it's brought a Stuka fleet down. Right, Test will form a Munin fleet because you can't obliterate Munins. We can just volley multiple bombers per salvo. What I'd like is like if you say okay, it's a hack meta. Why do we always have to go for the Munin? Why can't we make it so the Munin is good for certain things, the Eagle is good as a good counter for certain areas, Sacrilege is good for other things, and so that happens is you then have to be flexible with your responses. It's not a case of everyone get into Munins because they can do everything well.
Projectiles themselves are basically an all or nothing weapon. Either the ship is competent enough that the projectile makes it overpowering, or it's nerfed enough that it's not worth using even with the. It's the volley damage.
So if Munions, help me out here. If Munions counter Stuka fleets, why
can't
ever?
They can.
Okay.
Stukas can't counter Munins.
Yeah, it's the other way. Stukas don't counter Munins.
But they're still really
Stukas
effective on everybody else. I'm just trying to understand why would you use a Stuka fleet when you could just use a Munin fleet? If it's so apex, why would you do anything else?
Because you can take it
be
through
pushed around and they're faster.
Warp around
they
faster,
warp around faster.
wormholes.
Okay. Because I mean, what I'm hearing is
Titan Bridge.
What I'm hearing is that there are actually some little pieces of nuance, and there are actually uses for those edge case, or places where those other hacks do raise to triumph, but it's usually not in those kind of fleet environments, because like I said, you have extreme conditions that are putting very, very specific constraints on what is required. And then yes, under those conditions, very specific ships will rise to the top. And there's reasons why those other strategies are not rising to the top, but there's also a reason why the Sacrilege is one of the best ships in the Abyss.
It's really more that there's extreme conditions that allow for the other ships to be used, but most of the time,
the general response is Munins.
Yeah, it's
right.
like
because they are just the counter role.
No, what I'm saying is that the fleet requirements is the extreme requirements that demands things, and therefore the Union becomes the thing.
Requirement?
As you guys said, there needs to be consistency, there needs to be scalability.
Right,
like there's these very specific demands that make it so that the Union is better than other hacks.
But hold up, those same demands exist in literally every other aspect of human existence. This is
but not every other aspect of Eve.
No.
Yes, in literally every other aspect of Eve. Okay,
incorrect.
So when you go missioning, you want to not know what your ship.
No, but the demands that I have from my ship are going to be significantly different.
Ash,
Consistency is not an extreme thing. I'm
not just talking about the fact of having consistency. No, I'm saying what it is that they need it to be consistent to doing. Like the exact demands that makes the ship the best makes it so that if other ships were just as competitive with it, they would have to basically be roughly the same, because you say, okay, well, I need it to do these things. What is the best at doing that exact thing?
No, that's just it. It's not I needed to do these things. What is the best at doing these things? It's, you know what? In every situation, no matter what I need it to do, this combination is.
So the way
this ship has the volley damage. This ship has the tank. This ship has the speed. It has everything.
Yeah, this is the thing, is like the Eagle in theory is a stronger tank ship and has further range. The problem with that is Eagles just go, we don't care, we will catch you at 1 kilometer a second regardless. We have half your SIG and we have half your tank, but we do more damage than you. So if we catch you, your Eagle fleet is just demolished.
You mean?
All right.
To keep that sort of range is like impossible.
I had to step away to get ready for work. Sorry. We have to end the stream soon, but we got into some weeds here. Let's see if we can get out of it. Last few words or last few minutes on the stuff that was said here in Finland. This is the Finland Fan Fest that you're seeing on the screen. You can see it's over at some guy's house. There's Hilmar walking by the camera now. Looks like a small party with CCP guys and a few reporters, and I saw Bam Stroker in there.
Yeah, and we actually, I don't think have mentioned
CCP
this
Convict
on the show today, that CCP Convict is one of the new community devs, is the new community dev that they have been onboarding for a while now. Nobody really knew who it was, but it does turn out that it is the player formerly known as Bam.
Whoa.
Yeah, Bam is a CCPer.
Well, that explains a lot.
Right? So that's great. So Bam, who was an amazing player from Australia, he flew all around Australia to every fan fest for years and years and years. He flew to Vegas. This guy was super dedicated to showing up to fan fests and actually helping organize them. I believe also as part of Eve Down Under podcast.
He did way more than just show up to the to FanFest. Basically, if you were anywhere in the Australian area and you were like, we're two people that want to get together, he would do everything within his power to make sure that worked out.
And now he is a CCP community rep, which is fantastic.
That's a good choice right there.
That's definitely a good catch.
Yeah, I wasn't sure he was still in the game because I hadn't heard much from him lately. But
now you know why.
I was just asking about this like a month ago. I was like, wait, where did Bam go?
I didn't want to start hating Bam. I always liked Bam, and now I feel like there's going to be that chance that actually,
oh God,
like I actually kind of feel Bam had been trying to there'd been some fits and starts, I think over time of BAM trying to, trying to get a job with CCP and things like that. And I think something had fallen apart at one point or whatever. But when I did recognize yesterday that it was him who was the dev, because he tweeted something out from Sweden, and what the hell is Bam Stroker from Australia doing at this dude's house in Sweden, right?
Yeah.
I kind of saw that that's what it was. I'm sitting there going, oh man, Bam, you really joined it just the right time, didn't you?
Do you know what's funny? I was in NC and we have our recruitment open, right? And so CCP Larrikin, who was Dark Razor, the FC.
Did I say Sweden? Sorry, Finland.
Finland.
That other one that's just like the other one.
Dark Razor was an FC for NC. For the corporation was Van Diemen's Demise, VDD. They're great. I love these guys. In fact, I actually applied to join them first and was about to get in when I said, sorry, I'm going to actually go over to this other place because my old CEO's in there. And that was like, but I was going to join VDD, and that's where Dark Razor, CCP Larrikin was. And it was Bam Stroker right when I was, I think it was a little bit after I got there, accepting Bam Stroker's, was vouching for Bam to join NC to join VDD. So it's really interesting that both those guys are now CCP devs. Of course, they left NC behind and have no affiliation to it anymore at all. These guys are now
before the conspiracy theory stuff, right?
Too late. Let's just get that out.
There are CCP developers all throughout the game that you will probably never know who, where, and what they do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what Dopamine was doing before he joined CCP.
He had come from, wasn't he Dust related or something over in that?
Maybe.
Yeah, he had been something related to CCP, and now I forget exactly what it was. I don't know why I've got Sweden in my head. I think it's because of the bikini team, and Finland doesn't have one.
That you know of.
At least you're honest.
They're big in Russia. Team. I think Finland is actually closer to Russia, but they're right next door to Sweden. Yeah, so Bam Stoker.
Bam's a good pickup for them.
Yeah.
In that role, Bam is a good pickup for them.
I can't think of an even better.
And I think he will complement with Falcon perfectly.
Will he?
Yep. And look, that's not to say Dopamine's a great guy. He is, Bam. I think is a good pickup. Although he can't sing either, so they still haven't replaced Freaking Guard.
Wow.
It's true.
Hey man, dying cats sound good to someone. Just it's out there.
It's just permaband's got to stay together, even if they're not in the company. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that was a big announcement coming out, right? Because that's now in the open. He is now a CCP convict. Good job, Bam, and good luck. And what are some of the other things that came out at this FanFest?
CCP Hilmar thinks he's God.
No, let's not get
that's a direct quote.
Yeah, he kind of did directly compare.
Not to say I'm
but he did, however, immediately say that he wasn't claiming to be God.
Did he say I was the chosen one?
No, he did not say he was the chosen one. I think somebody else tweeted that out there, and he just retweeted it. No, I'm kidding.
No, it was he said something about changing the game like God could suddenly change spiders, right? And he's in that same position.
There were different levels of agency in reality. Like you've got your normal person, then you've got like your boss, and then you've got the government, and then there's God, and
God doesn't put out patch notes.
And God doesn't put out patch notes, which makes the immediate comparison of CCP to God. And it was a thing. It was stupid. It was funny. Leave it there.
No, horrendous. God does put out patch notes, but God doesn't put out roadmaps.
God, actually,
who are the prophets of EVE Online?
God does put out patch notes.
We're the priests, right? That makes us the priests.
We're just still figuring out how to read the ones that he put out with the Big Bang expansion.
Look, when
I apologize for this
joke about how he led it up to God, aside, right? Look, there have been discussions over time, where we talk about, look, yes, it's a sandbox or whatever, but look, CCP as a developer does act as God in these, in these kinds of situations. Now, they use the term caretaker a lot, and I wish they would take some more care. Okay, but either they are God in these situations where they feel that they really need to just flip tables and put down the flood of Gilgamesh and all that kind of shit on the world. Okay. Or, they have created something that, evolves over time through things that they have put in there, not needing things like the flood of Gilgamesh to fix what it was that they broke earlier.
So you're saying we need 40 years of chaos?
No, I hope we don't need 40 years.
People don't think in terms of God breaking things and having to do patches and fixes and nerfs and buffs to the world.
Have you read the Bible?
Yeah, I have, but I have almost cover to cover. But
on that note, goodbye, everybody.
Never seen it be described in that way, as if it's some.
I'd rather we didn't Sodom and Gomorrah
humanity.
the world.
This is exactly the same. Humanity literally found a way to cooperate and be too effective, and God just ripped them all apart and be like, nah.
Tower of Babel.
All right, collect 2 of every alliance.
Exactly.
Put it on the world
and
arc.
move it to Serenity.
Oh god.
Oh, this is entirely too much fun.
I gotta give it to you. That was fun.
And we are kind of joking about this, okay? But they do have that position in this world that they've created. That
they are the ultimate arbiters of whatever.
Right. Whatever entity you want to call it, or I don't give a crap, right? The fact is, they have that power. The question is how they use that power is what the player base is kind of going to react to. And I have always liked the idea of them being caretakers, or what have they said before? Janitors of the universe. Well, they're not janitors. Okay. They are caretakers. They are the people that are responsible for putting the things into the game that the players are going to react to. And that's a lot on them. It really is a lot on them. And I think that and it's one of the reasons why I hate the idea of think less, act more. I personally want them to think fucking more.
Well, you know what they're saying, right?
Think more, act more.
Well, they're saying we're not going to wait until we figure out what's going to happen. We're going to try it and see what happens. And that's what that's about.
Yeah, I would just hope that there'd be thoughtfulness prior. I'm not saying they need to spend 3 years, really deep diving. Oh my God, what are all the possibilities? And, how do we, they don't have to do that. But I don't want them to be flippant about it.
Oh, I don't think they're. I mean, some of the changes they're putting through are changes being talked about.
Definitely feels that way.
A long time, I think, though. The concepts that they're pushing through have been around a long time.
That doesn't mean they're not doing it flippantly.
I want to say something, which is that, as a game developer, you're trying to create an experience for your users. So if they're acting flippant, that doesn't necessarily mean they are in the background. The whole point of this is to create confusion and unrest and uncertainty among the player base. So if they're acting to us as if there's everything's just crazy, that doesn't mean that inside they don't have tons of metrics and tons of ideas and constant debates about how things are going.
Absolutely.
A good example is
what has been one of their biggest problems over time when it comes to player outrage. It's typically poor communication. It's typically miscommunications or misreading the audience based on something they say, and then boom, you get the flare up of oh my God. I think that they do need to be careful about maybe being flippant about some of the words that they use while they're trying to create a new atmosphere, across the game.
I don't think so. One good example to use is the way they change interest rates in the economy to prevent over-exuberance, right? Sometimes they don't actually need to make the change. They just need to hint that a change is coming, and that's enough. In a way, you could see what they're doing as being very efficient. If they want to squash some of the exuberant farming that's going on in the game and the activity that they don't want to see, they can just hint that they're going to make a change, and that might be enough sometimes.
How very goonswarm of them.
Yeah, I don't know that they could do a lot of just hint and then not follow through. I mean, because if what you get is the idea that, I mean, most people tend to react to
most of the player base,
actual thing.
Well, it's not the hint,
Era
it's
of
the threat.
chaos.
It's the threat, right? So the drifters attacking wasn't the really scary thing, because it's over now. But what it represents, what it could happen again at any time, like what else could happen if that's the kind of thing that's happening. That's the more vague, nebulous, as opposed to actually like saying, we think we're going to do something about Sinos, and then not actually doing something about Sinos.
So we say we've got this problem where the game's stale and people are min-maxing. Imagine if you thought that things were going to be changing all the time. You might not go and inject into 40 Rorquals anymore.
Well, I think that's the fourth dimension to all this stuff is don't make big plans. Don't make big plans in a certain direction to like corner the market on this or that, because things can sweep out from under you. And I think that's kind of the learned lesson that players have to come away with. It's like when somebody says, hey guys, this is how you make a fortune. It's like this. And it takes a big investment. You're going to think twice about it.
EVE is generally speaking a long-term game. If you can't actually try and set yourself some long-term goals, then how many people are just going to say, you know what? I don't need this game anymore. I will just go do something.
Your long-term goal needs to be less specific, is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think specific. I mean, that's the thing.
There's always going to be people that aren't going to match the player or the game. So like the question isn't, is there going to be people who don't like the fact that these changes are happening? The question is, are there going to be more people who are enticed by that than who are discouraged by that?
Yeah, very good point.
I think it makes it a much better game to have that sort of dynamism. When I came back recently, the thing I noticed was EVE felt really, really stale.
Well, that's what we're saying is if you make very, very specific plans, okay, so this first month I'm going to do this, and that's going to get me into having enough SP to build my first Oracle pilot, and then by my first Oracle pilot, I'll have enough to build in 2 weeks my second Oracle pilot, and all this if I do it inside of Horde or inside of Goonswarm or even now NCPL and test. Like those kinds of plans, those are going to be riskier. And that might be just the after effect of what they're actually doing, but it's interesting.
Right, but there's
more vague plans are risky right now.
There's a large amount of stuff you can do that's foundational. That is okay. So I'm going to be doing this over the next week, this over the next 2 weeks, and these things will adapt to whatever plans I need to, right? But when you hit the point where, okay, so this next skill I'm training, this single skill is 2 months. Then it becomes harder to say, well, I'm not going to have any specific plans because, well, anything is long term.
I mean, how long does it take to train into a Titan right now, Horrendous? How many days roughly?
A long
2 years still. Like 2 years from nothing.
I recall that the Imperium was bragging about the fact that they had basically like a 2 to 4 year plan to convert themselves to based on what they saw from upwell structures and all that kind of stuff. Like these are there was a consistency. This isn't like, am I going to finish training this thing and then have it be nerfed? Like that, we're not at that point by any stretch of the imagination. And just because you train a skill is going to still be useful.
But for individual players, that's the decision that's being made. Individual players aren't looking at, well, what is the Imperium's 4-year plan? Individual players are looking at, what are my plans?
And what I'm saying is that the idea that I'm going to train hacks right now, at the end of that time, training hacks is still going to be probably a good idea, even if Munins themselves are not the meta.
I think there's also something to, if I'm joining this game and I'm an adult and an experienced gamer and I join EVE, that's the profile of a new player sometimes, right? Like they're not kids and they're not people who don't know anything. They just don't know this game. But they've heard a lot about it. And if I come in and I see an advertisement that says, hey, join the Imperium because we can get you through our 2-year plan to get you up and running to be winning this game, basically earning a lot of money. And I'm thinking Yeah, expired. I'm thinking like, wow, this game is sewn up. Like it's already done. I don't need to play this game because there's no way to compete.
What, like life?
I don't know of any group that advertises, we will get you through our multi-year plan. Like, yeah, Aerith and them, they might talk about, well, we have this 4-year economic plan for how we're going to develop our infrastructure, but that's a long-term plan for long-term projects that have to be done long-term, because you don't do infrastructure over the short term. Short-term infrastructure isn't a thing. That's not infrastructure.
I don't think so. I think part of the 12-point plan that Aerith put together was advertising how successful you are and how they can be a part of it, and then you get the people. That was the big
Yes,
deal.
but advertising being successful and advertising you can be part of the success is not, we will get you through the next 2 years. That's a totally different thing. It's like saying, hey, go join our team at insert favorite store here because we're clearly doing.
And every time you have someone doing big plans or have big organizations, there's always room for innovation. There's always room for disruption.
You're right.
At least if the game actually have some points of failure or some sort of balance points, right? But in current Eve, we do not have that. It's just everyone just gets their fucking prize.
Both of you
goes
are
in the
right
corner
about
and
that
shut up.
sort of a thing. But what I am saying is the perception of coming into the game is that you have some kind of hope of being able to compete and to grow. And if it feels like the game is on a 1-year trajectory and this is how you actually do it, that feels like a closed game to me. It feels like a spreadsheet game.
I think we have to talk about privilege and some of that has that has obviously crept into EVE Online, and how we can reverse that sort of veteran privilege.
And you don't solve that by raising the barrier of entry or making it difficult to compete, right? This is why the whole antitrust joke was kind of funny, because he started talking about something completely different.
Yeah.
But how do you break up monopolies? You don't do it by doing these things. On the contrary, if you raise the barrier of entry, you are improving the existing monopoly. That's just Econ 101, right?
And Matterall, I agree with you when you say that, well, there's this perception that, oh, well, this is all sewn up, or this is the thing, and you can never catch up, you can never break in. And the way to fix that is not to just kind of make these, oh, well, we're going to do the blackout here, and we're going to change sinos. You have to address real structural issues that led to that. And as long as you have massive strategic assets that nobody can afford to lose, so nobody can afford to risk them, that's going to be the problem. Because you can't catch up.
And what's really funny about that whole can't afford to lose them thing is that they basically created an environment that cheapened these things. I believe with the thought that, well, if they're cheaper and easier to come by, people will use them more and blow them up more. But what we know is that almost no matter how cheap they kind of make things out there, right? People still look at it in their minds as no.
As I spent
we
this
don't just
time
throw
and
these
effort
willy-nilly.
getting it. It's
Exactly,
not just
because time and effort.
Right. And the other problem there is that, yeah, okay, so a Titan is cheaper now. That's great, but you still need to own space to build it. And if you don't have them, you can't defend yourself against them. So you can't hold space. You can't guarantee you'll hold.
I do want to remind people out there, while they're still engaged, is something we also didn't mention. Today is the first day of free skill point weekend, so make sure you log in all your things. It's just login. It's just login.
It's kind of ironic because I'm gonna contradict myself a little bit, because Arendis is right. The only way to really resolve something like a proliferation or a high fecundity level is not necessarily to try to neuter the existing ones, right? You need to make sure that the survivability and the death rate goes up. And that ties into being able to actually be at risk in space. So it's true that you might actually need to make it easier to get into these things, but then you also have to put in these limitations like what they talked about, that you can't asset safety them. That actually kind of makes sense.
To make them more disposable, they need to be less necessary.
So, I mean, I'm going to throw one out there, completely out there. Lower HP, lower build cost, not such a big step up from a Dread.
Yeah, but then you need to maybe add something like what they're doing with the triglavians, right? That you see them in space. So we get back to having the option of make abortion great.
Make what? No.
Nothing.
Yeah,
Oh, God.
no. And let's actually go back to talking about Hilmar as God rather than go into the mechanic changes that are proposed by all of us.
But this is important because this was what was the risk back in the day, that you had to think about where and how you build your titans, right? Because there was always the risk that someone would come in and disrupt it and destroy it before it actually got created. And we don't have that now because you can't see where stuff is being built.
It wouldn't matter if you could see it or not.
Yeah,
In order to attack a super capital production facility, you've got to be able to attack in that group space. And if you can't credibly threaten a structure in that group space, you're not attacking it.
How could you tell before that you can't now?
Because there would be a POS module online that wouldn't have any reason to be online if it wasn't.
Then how did Bob trick the others by having 2 pauses and then they killed the wrong one?
Because back then there were literally only 2 pauses.
What I'm saying is that just because you see an online capital shipwray doesn't necessarily mean that it is building a Titan.
But the point is that how many are you actually building?
But
how much value is
what
in
I'm saying
there?
is that you can scan the Sodio and see that it's what it's rigged for and make the exact same conclusions.
Oh, Dirk was not kidding, by the way. Bonus skill point weekend. Go in, log in, and claim those.
Why would he have been kidding?
Why would I have been kidding?
I don't know, man. Sometimes you're sarcastic, and I thought, oh, he's making fun of the Sino.
No, I'm trying to remind people it runs
awesome.
for 3 days beginning today.
I will doubt you less.
Wow. You can doubt me all you want to, but I mean, it's weird. It's just not usually about little shit like that.
I didn't know if you were kidding or not. That was because.
That's but we're back. But Arendis, we're back to the point I was trying to make earlier about the destructibility of industrial assets in EVE Online. If it was easier to actually destroy a building facility, you would have this whole thing where you had to balance how and where you build. You wouldn't just be able to say, "Oh, I'm going to build 8 Titans here, and then it's going to be visible in space, and it's not going to be contested because it's worth actually suiciding yourself into that shit."
Right, but it doesn't matter how fragile you make the structure as long as there's a timer involved, even one timer. Because, and again, this goes back to the whole asset safety question and Mitten's response on that. Mitten's response to the loss of the potential loss of asset safety is, okay, our asset safety is 1,000 Titans. If you've got that kind of ability to drop a defensive force that cannot be opposed, and within their own space, all of the people who produce supers do have that.
We agree that troop
movements to be attacked.
But we can agree that troop movements and spreading out your defense forces would change this, right?
No, because as soon as tie-dye kicks in, you've got time to get the rest of your guys.
Ash,
you say that, but if the stations has a very little amount of HP, if you take it to an extreme, it doesn't matter how many Titans you have. You can't stop someone destroying them.
Do you have a question, by the way, Ash Dorothy?
No.
Oh,
no,
sorry.
It was part of a larger conversation.
Okay. One thing I say to that, Arendis, is I don't think tie-dye is going to be around forever. In fact, I think it'll be gone in 2 years or less.
Sorry, what was that? You broke up.
Oh, sorry. I think tie-dye will actually be gone in the next 2 years. I think they'll solve it, and things will move faster. That should open things up.
Not for the massive battles, though.
What's that?
Like the massive battles, like X-37 type shit, are still gonna have max tie-dye.
Tie-dye is the solution.
No. The solution is what Hadean are doing.
Yeah.
That's not going to be coming in the next 2 years.
No.
Really?
I don't believe it'll hit in 2 years.
Okay, I could be wrong. I'm predicting.
That's still in the very early stages. Right now, it's basically just the physics engine and a couple of little things being added on. If you try to actually have it doing everything for a game, it's not ready.
No, Arendis, it's not that complex. For some reason, people keep equating the engine to being the whole thing. There is just a server architecture on the underneath that does work and could be used here.
Yeah, all the physics that was done in those things were actually just Unreal Engine running.
Like I'm under the impression that it can come faster than you would think, like soon.
I am too, but what we've really learned here is just Matterall's optimistic.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, he's not wrong to be. Amazon have it working already on their internal games, so
is this going to be like switching to Amazon Chat?
So yeah, given the chat performance, let's be very cautious about importing anything else to Amazon Web Services, please.
Yeah.
That's why I said so. Yeah, right. Like.
Well, anyway, tie-dye is. I think their goal is to get rid of tie-dye. I don't think tie-dye serves the game well. It just serves it better than crashing clients did. But it does slow it down, which creates a whole dynamic of people getting to a battle they have no business being in because they are coming home from work and the battle lasts 6-7 hours, and all of a sudden they can participate. It was kind of cool. And I liked it because I could play at work and hide the screen for an hour while my gun cycled. So I liked it, but it's unrealistic. Like, people should have fights that last 20 minutes to an hour and a half tops when you have a lot of people fighting. You know, clearing the field shouldn't take 6, 7, 8, 10 hours, or for God forbid, 22 hours, like BTEC was.
Let's say that with the caveat of it's unrealistic is never a great guideline for.
And you should always be able to enforce and increase a battlefield, right? It's just that it's a little bit too easy at the moment to get to it, right? You still want de-escalation. That's the whole point of Eve.
You want more risk, right? Like, you want risk. If you're going to fight, it's going to go fast. You're not going to get to bat phone everybody in. That's a little riskier than saying, I got friends. I got friends that can come. They just need to log in.
Which was why some actually suggested that the whole signer thing should really be a timer change instead. So how long does it take to actually signer into an area?
Well, who knows what secondary, tertiary byproducts spawn from that. Again, I'm not a game designer. I'm not suggesting changes. I'm just talking about priorities and experience with gameplay.
Because when you move troops around, right, then you kind of have to do it in stages. You can't just go in a straight line to the battlefield, because then you're at risk of being disrupted during that, right? This is all about maybe adding something like a time sink that's a diminishing return. So the longer you jump, the longer it's actually going to take you to get to the target. Mm-hmm. So you incentivize people to do it in stages. So it's like a 3-point jump to get to the target. That means there's points of failure along the line. That means you're adding a supply line. That supply line is something that you can interact with and disrupt, and then you get a lot more strategic gameplay spread out over space.
Yeah, I actually agree here with Xylix Zenith, who's also the guy that gave and does many times give subscriptions to people inside of Twitch. Thanks very much for doing that. It's really awesome. But I agree with him saying that unpredictability is underrated. I think it's also underappreciated. And that's what we meant when we were talking earlier about not making big plans, because you don't have the pathway given to you. And that's one of the things that is appealing about EVE Online, but it's also one of the things that makes it feel like you can't compete with people who've been here longer and have more time on their hands to complete the path.
Let me just go on record here. Unpredictability is good. Like, Eve needs to be dynamic. There needs to be what some game companies have called a stable cycle of instability. But until CCP demonstrates that that's what they're actually doing and that's what they're capable of doing, their history does not inspire confidence in that vision.
Well, why not? What history?
Because it's Band-Aid. It's always Band-Aid, and then not going back and
because they don't iterate. They do something. They announce that, and we will totally iterate on this, and then they never do.
Well, except that's not actually true.
Their analysis completely misunderstands what happened. As an example, all right, look at Resource Wars. Resource Wars, we got told, yeah, we'll keep iterating on this. They didn't go back and keep iterating on it. The entire problem with Resource Wars, which they dumped because it didn't get a lot of uptake. It didn't get a lot of uptake because the rewards were not worth the effort. It had nothing to do with the gameplay being something people found onerous or people didn't like. The rewards just weren't worth the effort. They had this thing, it's in high sec, it's aimed at newbies, and so you get your LP and you go to the LP store and 100 million ISK, please. What? It's a newbie.
Can I take an older example that's a little bit easier to maybe understand? We used to have a slot limitation on building and research. And this was something that you could then circumvent by building pauses, and that was a little bit of a shit show. Anyways, the point is that you couldn't actually rent these out effectively. So when everyone started plugging all the NPC stations with their prints to actually hold them up, then you pretty much had a scarcity. You couldn't have access to building slots. That was a huge problem, and everyone went, fix it, please. The solution that CCP then came up with was to then add infinite slots. That makes the slot value completely worthless. And all we wanted was the ability to be able to rent out or give access to our alliance members in pauses. We never got that, but that was built into structures. So they built both features. One was a stupid band-aid that has made slots invaluable. Worthless. They're completely worthless now. You can build whatever you want in one location. You don't have to spread out your industry. That is a complete mistake.
My impression was to get more people involved in the combat quicker. So you let mining flourish like it did. You let everybody build anything they want, because you can build as much as you want anywhere. Like we were talking about the Falcons. Anyway, you can build a lot of stuff quickly to get more people involved in the combat, which is probably what they have pushed for the last few years.
But if you in real life, if you want to be able to build more, you have to build a bigger factory.
I agree.
Right,
yeah.
But not all design is based on 100% real life, and either way,
God, not that argument.
My point
the point is that it was working before, and it was better, and now they destroyed it.
It wasn't.
Industrialists fucked off.
It wasn't
what
working
we're
before.
discussing is whether or not they iterate on something, and the point is that we don't know whether or not they're happy or sad about the outcome of that change. But my point is that they have actually demonstrated that they're iterating quite a bit, especially in the last year, especially when it comes to PvE content. And I've said this a lot of times. PvE content is really easy to iterate on because you have a goal of what the experience is supposed to provide, and then you can monitor to see if that goal is being achieved, and if it isn't, then you adjust it how you need to in order to achieve the goal. PvP, significantly harder to balance, because the problem is that, yeah, we can all say that interceptors are going to become crazy and fuzzy, but until that actually is played out, you don't know if a different option is going to happen, or if a hard counter will somehow emerge, right? So, the idea is that with the VNI change, then it's all going to do this. Everybody's going to go to Myrmidons or whatever. I don't actually believe that that's literally what's happening. And I also
VNI
firmly
changes
believe
aren't existing without other changes going in, so your conclusions are getting polluted, which goes back to the other thing I was saying, that they change multiple things at once, and then you can't tell what had.
Right, but that kind of goes to my point, though, that we can't predict what the outcome of anything is, because, well, we don't actually even know what the next change is going to be necessarily, but they do. Like they know where they're going. And so this idea that they are not adjusting things is just not true. In PvP, though, you have to give it time. A really good example is the spit pull thing, right? So spit pulls were overpowered, but the issue is that it's hard to know whether or not the spit pull was overpowered because it was doing its job too well, or is it because its predator is not able to do its job well enough, right? Like, or is there not a good predator for it, right? There's so many more layers to it, because unlike in PvE, where you completely control one side of the equation, you actually don't get to control either side of the equation. You just get to control the intersection points between the two, which is significantly harder because both sides are a player whose experience needs to be taken into consideration. So yeah, those kinds of iterations often take a lot of time, and CCP has taken more than normal. But you know what? They've also always attested that there are people, including CCP or CSM people, who have advocated that they have always iterated too quickly. So when it comes to balance of that sort, and one of the biggest reasons why is the investment of skill training, right? People don't want to go into the spit pull and then immediately be told that, oh, by the way, that sucks now.
All right. So
and I'm gonna agree with you that yes, they have been better about their iteration lately. That doesn't mean that they've got enough of a track record of it at this point. 1 year does not offset 10 plus years of their style and habits. You, before I have any confidence in them, it's got to sustain for a while.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I have to cut the stream and actually do the day job. But if you guys want to hang out, we'll be in public chat. I'll be listening in too on TIS Discord. I'll put that one last time into the stream, and you guys can get to Discord in that way. Come join us and hang out with us during the day as we continue to talk about some of the announcements that were made at this Finnish Fan Fest. Thanks very much. We will see you Sunday.